Welcome, welcome, crew, guys, gals, ghouls, and other worldly beings. Let's climb aboard the mothership, secure our tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. I'm your ghostess with the mostest, TessaTNT, broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. And thank you so much for hanging out with me. We are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It is an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have you hanging out with me on the airwaves tonight. If you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it or working out, you can check me out under We Are Paradox Media at Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Apple Radio, basically wherever you listen to your broadcasts and podcasts, and you should be able to find me there. All right, so I wasn't able to do a show last weekend. I found a nice camping spot and went camping for 8 days with my kiddos. Both of my oldest daughters got to come and stay a night, each on separate nights, and it was just really awesome. Lost some bread to some chipmunks and squirrels and crows. But otherwise, it was a pretty awesome trip. The first 2 nights, we made it back to camp so late, we didn't even mess with making a fire. Night number 3, I was definitely going to make a fire. And that morning, the park ranger that attends to that site came up and was like, "Here's your red flag. Sorry, no more burning." But luckily, I had my cook stove that I got from Cabela online, and thank goodness I had that because we would have been living on sandwiches, and that wouldn't have been very yummy. But yeah, we were able to have s'mores, and Novocaine, my second oldest, she and her boyfriend made daytime s'mores, which are Baby Bell cheese. You could do whatever kind if you like mozzarella, cheddar. I think it's Munster or something like that was the other one they had. I'm not sure. Yeah, yeah, I have no idea what the other one was, but yeah, melt the cheese up, put that in between 2 Ritz crackers with pepperoni or salami or both. Your choice of cheese. I think having some sort of, I'm thinking tomato sauce or something like a little pizza sort of thing, but maybe that's another creation we'll come up with later. Got to try out my new inflatable kayak. That was so awesome. I don't like to fish in the morning, so we went in the evening and we got some really big bites, and you could just sit there and watch the fish. You can't see their bodies in particular, but you could see the movement under the water of them playing around under the water there and stuff. And we got some really big bites, but we didn't bring the tackle box out on the little maiden voyage. We just had some power bait that we were using in a little minnow-shaped power bait and some fireballs, which I prefer earthworms, but I didn't get any earthworms this time. Instead of doing story time tonight, I figured we'd do some trippy TikToks. I'm getting into the scary true story thing right here. I'm gonna try to fix it where these comments aren't off to the side, but yeah, let's get into some scary true stories.
Story tonight is easily the scariest one I've told yet, and that's because it happened to me tonight. I had a whole story planned for tonight, but I have to change gears and tell you about what just happened to me. You know the drill. Grab a drink, grab a cozy blanket, and settle in while I tell you a scary story in my garden after dark. Welcome to Ghosts in the Garden. For those who don't know, my husband and I live in rural Michigan. We're not super rural, but we're still in a town of less than 10,000 people. Tonight we were both having a craving for Panda Express, and so I decided to drive a couple towns over and get that for us. The drive there was uneventful. I drive on back roads that are one way in each direction, 55 miles an hour, and usually surrounded by forest and farmland. I got our food, I got back in the car, and I started my trek home. The drive was only about 15 to 20 minutes depending on how fast I went, so it's not a big deal. I don't drive a large car, but I don't drive a small car either. It's a mid-sized SUV, brand new. The only new car I've ever owned in my life. I was driving as I usually do. My windows up, music blaring, singing along. And as I was going through a particularly dark stretch of forest, I got this uneasy feeling. As soon as I felt it, I heard something slam the side of my car. It was loud enough that I immediately paused my music and thought that I'd hit something. But I realized I'd seen nothing in the road, and nothing hit the front of my car. It was a very loud, audible bang on the side of my car next to the driver's side door. It sounded as if someone had come up and taken both hands and slammed them on the side of the car. At first, I tried to rationalize it and figured that something that was in the back of my car had just fallen. I have a couple cases of canning jars in the back as canning season is quickly approaching. But as quick as that thought showed up in my mind, I realized canning jars falling would have sounded like falling glass, not like someone hitting the outside of my car. I was only about 10 minutes from home, and so I sped up a bit and kept driving. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling the whole drive home, but nothing else notable happened other than almost hitting a deer a couple minutes from my door. As I pulled onto my street, I felt relieved. I pulled into the driveway, turned the car off, and quietly exited the car as to not wake up our son, and started walking up to the front of the house. At this point, it was very dark outside, almost 10:30 p.m. We have street lights on our street, but they are not very bright, and the only light as I walked up was our porch light. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my husband call for me from out in the driveway. I heard him just say, "Hey babe," as he always does when he greets me. I turned to answer him, looking into the driveway, but I didn't see anyone there. At that point, I was a bit creeped out because I realized while the voice sounded identical to his, it had a very flat tone. It didn't have the usual human inflection, and it sounded almost robotic. At that point, I opened the front door and quickly went inside, shutting it behind me, and as I turned around, I see my husband walk out of the kitchen, saying, "Hey babe," as he always does when I get home. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I told him that I thought he was outside. He said he'd been inside all along, washing dishes in the sink. The way our house is laid out, the only way he could have gotten from the driveway back to the kitchen would be going through the garage, and I would have heard the garage door open. Thoroughly unnerved, we sat down and ate dinner while I told him about the sound on my car. He couldn't give me an explanation to what it could have been. And then, of course, he jokingly asked me if I was going to tell you guys this story. I told him yes, and he laughed and said, "Good luck out in the garden." If any of you have encountered something like this, I would absolutely love to hear what you have to say. Do you think the sound on the side of my car and that voice were related? I don't know if you can feel how nervous I am sitting out here right now in the dark alone, but I am going to head back inside now, and please let me know in the comments what you think that was. If you have your own story, please send it over to me. I would love to read it, and I would join you next time out in my garden after dark for another scary story. Bye.
No. Who's there?
This true story is unsettling.
Doctor Who? Bruce Chase is here.
In 1977, an 11-year-old girl named Janet became the center of one of the most famous paranormal cases in British history. Because while living with her family in London, she began to show signs of possession, which would include levitation and objects being thrown.
Hi, I'm Nicole with Haunted Threads After Dark. Today I'm going to be reading a paranormal scary story, which is my favorite type of scary story.
Oh yeah.
And this one is from the subreddit True Scary Stories, and the author is unknown. It is called Something Was Waiting in the Dark. This is my first post and is a true story. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I'm probably about 10 or 11 at the time. One night, I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent. So I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. That's probably why he woke up. He had to go to the bathroom. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner and past the kitchen and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, click, click. Finally, it shut off completely. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched on to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot, and my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except my mom and I. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice. "Help me. I'm lost." Yeah, no, thank you. I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't. And instead, I barely said no. I don't think I could even say that. This is just no. I can't do it. I wouldn't be able to speak. Before this thing starts running at me, it sounded like on all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I ever heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms and pulls me into my room and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door. As we listen, it sounded like the thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and then slammed. We sat there horrified till daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that and never set foot in the house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it, and it will come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life. All right, guys, what do you think it was? Do you think it was a child? Do you think it was something else completely that was just haunting? Do you think it just was bored one night, wanted to come out and play? What do you think it was? See, if that happened to me, with being the mother, I don't know how she goes and lives in that house after that. Like, no, I'm gone. I'm out. No, thank you.
Bye,
So,
Felicia.
let me know what you think in the comments.
Let me spray this because, baby, this story submission didn't just give me chills. It physically made me look over my shoulder, y'all. I was tripping at work reading this. And hey, Toxins, welcome back to my page where I don't spill tea, I brew coffee. And not everything that I serve is gonna be safe. So, this was submitted by a woman, and I'm gonna call her Rachel. And she wrote, "Please do not use my real name. My husband still refuses to talk about this. And every time I bring it up, the air in the room completely changes." Now, this happened about 3 years ago, she said. Rachel's husband worked in heavy construction, and she said every single weekday, like clockwork, his truck pulled out of the driveway at like 5:30 every morning. And he didn't walk back through the front door until 6:15 every evening. That was his routine. It never changed until like one Tuesday. She said it was like 5:40 p.m. and the sun was starting to dip below the trees a little. She said she was standing in the kitchen cutting up some vegetables when she heard the heavy sound of a deadbolt. She said the front door opened and then it closed. She said she smiled and she said, "You're home early." She said it was no answer. And then she heard the boots. She said she heard them literally walking across the floor, like heavy footsteps or whatever, and kind of dragging slightly. She said the exact rhythm that her husband always walked in, like after a 12-hour shift. And she said she heard the footsteps pass by the kitchen entrance. She never looked up. She assumed it was him. And then a few seconds later, she heard the master bedroom door slowly creak open. And then it clicked shut. She said she figured he was exhausted and he had like a rough day, and he just went in there to like change his clothes or whatever. She said about 2 minutes later, her phone started vibrating across the counter. And the caller ID said, husband. She said she answered without thinking, I know. Dinner's almost ready. She said there was a long pause, and then she heard machinery roaring in the background. Her husband laughed. Dinner? Babe, I'm still at work. Rachel said she stopped cutting, y'all. She said the knife stayed pressed against the cutting board. And she was like, stop playing with me. I just heard you walk into the bedroom. She said the laughter disappeared, and his voice became very serious. And he said, Rachel, I am 45 minutes away. I would have lost my shit right there, y'all. She said the kitchen suddenly felt like it was cold, not chilly, but cold. She said the kind that makes your hair stands on your arms. Like the chills that I've been.
Paranormal Bill.
She said the house was completely silent, y'all. She said no closet doors, no footsteps, no movement, no nothing. And she picked up the shelf knife. She said she walked towards the bedroom and she stood outside that closed door listening. She said she didn't hear anything. Nothing. She said she slowly turned the knob. Oh, chills. She said she pushed the door open and the room was empty, y'all. She said the closet shut, bathroom empty, windows locked from the inside, and there was nowhere anyone could have gone. She said, but there was footprints, y'all. Rachel spent the next 45 minutes sitting on the couch with every light on in the house because she was terrified. And when her husband's truck finally pulled into the driveway, she said she nearly burst into tears. But the second he stepped inside, he froze. He didn't even say hello. He looked straight down the hallway and asked, who's been in the house? Rachel said she felt her stomach drop. And she asked him, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? He pointed towards the hallway floor. Only then did she notice the footprints, y'all. She said it was like a trail of wet, black, muddy boot prints leading from her front door straight into her master bedroom. So she wasn't imagining this stuff at all. She said, but it was only one set and it was going in and none coming back out, y'all. And Rachel said she looked at her husband's boots. They were completely dry. He hadn't stepped in mud all day. Y'all, I'm telling you, I would have fucking lost my shit. Boy, nope. I probably would have moved. But here's where it gets worse, y'all. They scrubbed those floors with soap, bleach, steam, everything. The prints disappeared until the next evening at 5:40 p.m. The same dark outline slowly bled back through the hardwood, she said. She said in the exact same places. And her husband finally called her grandmother. And in their family, she was the person that everybody went to when something couldn't be explained. She walked onto that porch. She stopped, y'all. She looked down that hallway. And she refused to step another foot inside that house. And she said quietly, some things don't waste their energy breaking into your house. Y'all get what I'm saying? They wait outside your gates until they're mistaken for someone who's already welcome. Did you hear me? They wait outside the gate until they're mistaken for someone who's already welcome. Then she looked directly at Rachel and she asked one question. When you heard him come home, did he ever actually say your name? Rachel stood there for a minute, she said, thinking. She said she replayed everything in her mind. The deadbolt, the footsteps, the bedroom door. But it never spoke, y'all. She slowly whispered, no. The grandmother closed her eyes and simply said to her, good. Now, she prayed over the whole entire house, opened every window, cleansed the entire perimeter, and after that night, she said the footsteps never came back. Rachel ended her email with one sentence that honestly made me put my fucking phone down for a minute, y'all. She wrote, I still don't know what walked through my house that evening, but whatever it was, knew exactly how to sound like someone I loved.
Yep.
Now tell me, if you heard your front door unlocked and you heard a familiar footsteps of someone you love, because I know y'all be knowing people's footsteps. I know people's footsteps. I can tell who you are by the way your body shifts and how you step. Would you go looking for them, or would you wait until they looked you in your eyes and spoke first? Let's talk about this. I'm serving in black today, and I want y'all to drink from a clean source. And don't forget, 2026 mindset is lock them gates. And what the hell do y'all think that was?
Not
Anyways,
good.
love y'all and see you in the next video.
My mom was unalived in her own home, and I promise you, I think that house was haunted after. Alright, so Pete.
Pete.
As most of you guys know, my mom was unalived by her husband in her own home. 2 days before her funeral, I don't know why, but me and my wife thought it'd be smart to spend the night there. In my head at the time, because I had to clean the entire house out by myself, so I thought it'd be smart for me to box everything up so that after her funeral, I could just load it up and move it. Biggest mistake I'd have never made. So me and my wife and my 3-month-old daughter at the time ended up going to that house. Now, spending the night at my mom's house was not out of the ordinary. Me and my wife used to do it from time to time just so, you know, we could spend time with my mom. But this time, shit was just different. So we get to the house. We end up kicking back. It's a touchy time for me. I'm grieving. I'm in this house. I'm thinking of memories we've had and all kind of stuff. So we up in the living room watching TV, because my mom had a huge TV system. So we watching TV, got our feet up, just relaxing. Out of nowhere, my mom's AC turns on, and it started making the weirdest noise I've never heard it make. That joint sounded like, ooh. Now, most black people know this rule, but I'm gonna let you guys know for those who are not a part of the community. When you hear something spooky or witness something spooky, you don't say nothing. You look at each other just to verify that the other person heard that same noise. And you be like, hell no, like the movie Nope. You be like, nope, and keep on doing what you're doing. I look at my wife, she look at me. We both said with our eyes, nope, and went back to watching TV. After a while, it starts getting louder. It's like,
Oh, no.
I give my wife the side eye, she give me the side eye, my baby give both us the side eye, and all three of us said collectively, nope, and keep watching TV. Then you just hear a crash noise. At this point, I am terrified. But I can't be, because I'm the man, so I gotta check the noise.
Check it.
I get up off the couch and I go into the kitchen, and as I walk into the kitchen, I see a glass that was in the cabinet. Don't know how it fell, but it fell out of the cabinet and broke on the floor. I look at my wife and I say, I don't give a fuck, Keisha. Sweep it up and go back to watching TV. Fast forward, it's nighttime. It's time for us to get to bed. I am exhausted because for the last few days, I really barely got any sleep because I just had to do so much stuff. We get in my mom's bed. She got that Tempur-Pedic, and I ain't never slept in one, so I'm excited. We done got all the sheets off. We done damn near washed the mattress damn near. Had to put new sheets on there because I'm not sleeping in the same mattress that another man's schlong been in. I'm just not doing it. Now, every night before I go to bed, I always go and pee. I use the bathroom, I come back, and it's double doors. I close both and make sure they're closed. I fall asleep 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife wakes up because she hears a weird noise. Now, she tells me that at this time, she looks at the closet door and it just creaks open like, and she swore she saw a dark figure standing there, staring at her. Once I'm asleep, ain't no waking up, so she couldn't get me awake. She tells me all this information the next day, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm not really believing her. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm thinking she just was spooked out. Next day, we end up leaving the house and trying to get it cleaned out a little bit. The scenario with my mom happened in the garage. So as I'm in the garage, you can just feel this energy. It feels like somebody's like touching the back of your neck. While I'm in there, I'm by myself, and all of a sudden, I just hear I hear it, but I'm like, I'm not paying it no mind. Whatever that is, it's probably my wife and her laughing, playing with my daughter. I'm not knowing. Then all of a sudden, something just falls in the garage. Something that should not have failed just fell. I look at it, and just like the black people's room, I said, nope. Got my black ass up out that garage expeditiously. Fast forward, it's nighttime, time for us to go to bed. I go use the bathroom, and as I'm coming out the bathroom, my wife says, make sure you close that door. I need to see that you've closed it and it's not going to be able to be open freely. So I close it, and I just do this so she can see like it's closed all the way, and I get into bed. She would not let me go to sleep. She said, you staying up because you going to witness it. I keep dozing off a little bit, and she hit me. I'm like, okay, I'm up. By this time, it's like 2 in the morning. And I said, babe, I got to go to sleep. We got to get on the road tomorrow. I got a long drive to go to my mom's funeral. As I'm saying this, all of a sudden, the bathroom door just goes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm laying down, and I look up, and I'm staring at the door. And I swear to you, I saw a dark figure standing there. Me being me, black folk, when we get scared, we get mad. I jump up out the bed, I go, and I just yank the door open. I'm like, what the fuck in here? I don't see nothing. I'm like, bro, what the hell? I end up getting back in the bed and trying to go to sleep, but my mind is racing at this point now. And then all of a sudden, I just start hearing, nigga.
Uh-oh.
Nigga.
Mm-mm.
Mind you, my mom's nickname for me was nigga. So now I'm terrified. I can't sleep. I say, babe, did you hear that? She said, hell yeah. We ended up getting up out that room and just going straight to the living room and just sleeping in there. The people that my mom rented the house from contacted us like, hey, would you guys like to just move in here? And we both said, hell no. Next day, we ended up getting on the road and going to the funeral. After the funeral, we get back to Memphis and had to go to that house and clean it out. But I would not go there alone. I had to have somebody with me. We ended up getting the house cleaned out, and I've never stepped foot in there again. The other day, I was driving past that house, and I saw a new family staying there. And all I could think was, damn, I wonder if they hear those same noises.
Imagine you're working the front desk of a hospital morgue and you see this happen. Would you quit on the spot? Because you personally witnessed a dead person walking out of the morgue. She's a head nurse at a hospital assigned to the morgue reception, responsible for registering bodies and doing night patrols. Everything seems completely normal at first. But deep into the night, she sees an elderly man walking out from inside. At first, she doesn't think much of it, but a few seconds later, she suddenly remembers something absolutely horrifying. This elderly man was personally registered by her into the morgue, and yet now she is seeing him with her own eyes. Her mind completely short circuits. She has no idea what is happening and is terrified. Out of her mind, she immediately jumps up from her seat. She decides to follow the elderly man, but what she sees next sends chills through her entire body. She panics and runs for her life, fleeing the scene in terror. That very night, she writes her resignation letter and leaves the job. According to insider sources, ever since witnessing this incident, she has been plagued by nightmares every single night.
There's a good reason why people close their curtains at night in the Appalachian Mountains. There are things in those woods that are terrifying. And one of those things,
I stayed at an Airbnb with my bestie, and this thing's in the middle of the woods. And, no curtains. You know, at least have some curtains on windows for people who want to close the curtains, who don't like whatever's in the woods to be staring in the window at them as they try to sleep at night. Because I'm just a guest at my friend's Airbnb. It's a 1-bedroom. Yeah, I didn't sleep very good that night.
Things happen to be the Appalachian Wendigo. Now, there was this man named Jim. Jim decided one day that he was going to sell everything he had and buy some acreage of land in the Appalachian Mountains and start this homestead.
Yeah.
So Jim finds this good piece of land and he moves there, builds a cabin and several structures. And for a year, his life was amazing. He said one day, though, he gets a knock on his cabin door. And he said he opens the door. On the other side of the door was this older gentleman. And he said the gentleman started speaking. He said, "Hey, my name is Fox. I live not too far from here. And I wanted to check on you because I know you're all alone out here. And things can happen to people who are alone in the woods."
Yeah,
and
that's
Jim
not
was
creepy
kind
at
of
all.
like, why is this guy saying all this and stuff? So he said the guy continued to talk to him, but all he could think about was the fact that this guy, Fox, looked exactly like his father, who had passed away when he was a young boy. And he said it was just very, very eerie. It was like talking to his father. So he said, finally, the guy said, "You be safe out here. I'll see you later." And he said the way he said it was kind of creepy. So he said this guy, Fox, he just walked away and took off into the woods, and he never seen him again. A couple months after this, he said, one night he was asleep in his bedroom, and he awakes to this sound of scratching. And he said the scratching sounds were coming from his window. And he said when he looked over in the direction towards his window, he sees the shadow appear, and it's almost in the shape of a person. And he said the shadow just moved across the wall all the way around him to the other side of his bed. And he said the next
So Britney Spears owned this house, believed it was haunted, and sold it with everything still inside to Brittany Murphy, who would then go on to die inside of the house. Maybe this is all just coincidence, but it's still incredibly eerie when you hear the full story. So this is the mansion that Britney Spears moved into in 2001. And according to Britney's former makeup artist, during the time that she was living there, she had some type of spiritual transformation and invited someone over who claimed to be a spiritual healer. But after this supposed spiritual healer left, something didn't feel right to her. Britney told her former makeup artist that she thought the spiritual healer may have opened some type of portal, and she claimed that there were evil spirits inside of the house trying to harm her by doing things like pushing her down the stairs. The entire situation scared Britney so badly that she left the home immediately and never returned. She then sold the house along with everything inside of it to Brittany Murphy, who would then go on to die in that house under very suspicious circumstances. Her husband Simon would also die 5 months after her in the same room. Now,
I heard supposedly there was black mold, but I don't know. But it freaks me out because I have black mold in this very office.
after Britney's death, Simon gave an interview stating that his wife tried to avoid the house at all costs. He said that he felt that maybe the property was unlucky, and before her death, he had planned to move his wife and his mother to New York City. Then, after Simon's death, his mother was quoted saying, "All I know is that before Simon's death, he was having hallucinations that things were crawling out of his skin." Now, a lot of people believe that this can all be attributed to toxic mold poisoning. Maybe the home was filled with black mold, which, when exposed to for a prolonged period of time, can cause hallucinations, paranoia, insomnia. It can also cause breathing problems. And the ultimate cause of Britney and Simon's death was listed as community-acquired pneumonia. But the coroner's office said that toxic mold wasn't the case. They instead said that Britney's death was due to an iron deficiency and intoxication from prescription medications, which likely weakened her immune system and then led to a fatal bacterial infection. Simon's cause of death was nearly identical. So if this was the case, was Britney Spears right? Was there something unexplainable inside of that house?
And this is why I sleep with my TV on. Welcome back, Creepy Crew, to another Mailbox Monday. I am back in my humble abode. I appreciate you guys for being so patient with me. Let's get straight into it. A lot of y'all said y'all like the format of me like reading the story directly and giving my commentary. We're gonna try that out this week, and then y'all are gonna let me know how y'all feel about it, and we'll see.
All right, let's go, boo.
So for the story, my name is gonna be Tanya. I want to say around 2006 or 2007. I was probably 15 or 16 at the time this was happening. I used to live in a private home with my family. It was my mom, my two brothers, and my sister, and occasionally we would have friends stay over. So at the time, I had been experiencing some paranormal activity. You said that a little casually. I had been experiencing paranormal activity. Like you say it like, my God, sometimes we experience things as such. Here's the layout of the house. From back to front was the kitchen. Next was my mom's room. She was across from the bathroom. Then a little down the hall was my room. Slight right down the hall was two closets and the back door. A slight right from there was my little brother's room. Next was my older sister's room, which she had sliding doors that connected to my big brother's room. He took over the living room, which had the front door. Again, what's up with us making living rooms bedrooms? You know, the front door being in my bedroom, it's a hard no for me. It's an absolutely not. But teach his own. The first night it happened, I was in my room. I had a bunk bed at the time, and I usually slept on the top. It was time for bed, so I'm all tucked in, and I finally turned the TV off. I never really understood that the dark could get darker, but in the corner of my room, next to the door, there was a silhouette of a very tall man who had to be easily 6'5". I don't give a damn if he was 3'2". Nobody should be in this motherfucker but me. And as soon as I seen him, I would have did one of three things. A, hoop. B, holla. C, all of the above. Because what are we talking about? A man in the corner? Excuse me? I screamed and started banging on the wall to get my mother's attention. She ran in, and when she turned on the light, there was nothing there. I told her what happened, and she made a little joke about saying, tell him if he's staying, he has to pay rent, and that was it. Nothing's funny. What are we laughing at? You're making jokes. I just shit myself. You're talking about paying rent. You know what? I'm finna call CPS. Don't even worry about it. After that, I started facing the wall with my head under the covers. And the demon man is just standing in the corner like, look at her. What she think them covers gonna do? I honestly thought I was just going crazy. And I never brought it up to anyone else and just hoped it would stop. A few months later, my best friend, I'll call her Lucy, came over for a sleepover. We had a great night. We're getting ready for bed, lights off, TV still on, and we're talking. I'm on the top bunk as usual. She's on the bottom bed. I'm already positioned facing the wall, head under the covers as I've been for a while as we're talking. She finally cuts the TV off using the remote, so everything is pretty much pitch black. I would say about 20 minutes later, I hear Lucy whisper my name, but she sounds terrified. She's like, Tanya. I'm like, yeah. She gets quiet. A few seconds goes by and she whispers, you see that? And I'm like, see what? Now, I know exactly what she sees because I've seen it too. And I'm sitting here relieved that I'm not crazy, but now I'm even more scared because this means it's real, right? So she goes on to say, there's a man in the corner. I'm like, oh, you see him too. Had I been Lucy, what the fuck you mean, oh, you see him too? Because that means you knew this thing was going to be here. You knew that at nighttime, this demon silhouette man be standing in the corner of your bedroom. And you invited me over here to spend the night. I'm gonna beat your ass. I'm fit too. Because why would you not give me that information? Hey, you can come stay, but I just do want to let you know it. Sometimes I do be this nigga standing in the corner of my bedroom at nighttime when I cut the lights off. Just a little heads up. So I could say absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? Lucy then jumps on my bed. We turn the TV back on. When one of my siblings goes by, I ask him to turn on my light. We basically talk until the sun comes up about the guy who's there, but not there. After that, I start sleeping with my TV on just so it wasn't completely dark. I'm not getting any rest in this room. TV on, TV off. I'm not getting no more rest in here. None. Matter of fact, I'm going to the living room. I will take my chances with my brother in the front door than I will with the Babadook. Okay?
What a Babadook? What a Babadook?
From that house and getting older, I've never experienced things like that again, but it still gives me chills when I think about those times. It give me more than chills. Probably gave you trauma. So the hell it gave me. Y'all be safe out there.
PTSD.
This woman was left
insomnia the
completely
rest of her life?
terrified after witnessing a real-life glitch in the Matrix. At first, she was just walking normally, trying to understand what she was seeing in front of her. There were dozens of quails running across the ground, all moving fast in the same direction. But then suddenly, every single one of them froze at the exact same moment, like time had stopped. Not one of them blinked, not one of them moved, not even a tiny step forward. The woman kept walking around them, looking closely, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Everything else around her was still moving completely normally, which made it even more disturbing. She was moving, the camera was moving, even the sounds around her were still there. But those quails stayed frozen in place, like someone had paused only them in that exact moment. That's when her panic started getting worse, because nothing about this looked natural at all. She broke down in tears, asking herself how something like this could happen in real life. And the scariest part was, they still didn't move even after she got closer to them. Want to know what happened next? Comment quail for part 2.
3 years ago, one of my good friends invited me to go to a psychic fair with her, and I thought it was just going to be fun, nothing too crazy. I didn't even think I was going to get a reading done. I walked around for a while, and then an older lady reached out. She said, hey, I'd love to give you a reading. And I wanted to say no. I was about to say no, and then she said, I've been waiting for you. And at first when she said this, I'm like, okay, she probably says this to everybody just to lure them in, right?
But
anyways, so I sat down anyways, just kind of for the plot. And she didn't ask me for my name. She didn't ask me for my birthday. She literally just sat and looked at my hands for a minute. Then she said, you've been having the same dream. And I could literally feel my smile start to disappear, because that's crazy, because for the last 2 months I have been having the same exact dream. And it's where I'm standing outside of my own apartment and I'm looking in through the living room window. Before I could even ask how she knew that, she just slid over one of her business cards, and on the back of it was a sentence, and it said, don't answer the third knock. And I thought she was kind of joking, and I asked, what does this mean? And she didn't say anything else other than some warnings aren't meant to understand until later. And then that was it. Reading literally lasted like 5 minutes top. And then as my friend and I were driving home, my friend was actually making fun of me for taking it so seriously. And then she kind of got me out of my head a little bit. I'm like, okay, you're right. Yeah, this does kind of sound like stupid, whatever. So I forgot about it until a couple nights later, I got a knock at my door around 11 p.m. So it was a knock, and then it was another, and then I went to go look outside in the peephole, and I didn't see anything. I just figured maybe it was a couple of kids messing around, right? I went back and I sat on the couch. A couple minutes later, I heard another 2 knocks. Again, I went to go look. Nothing was there. I rolled my eyes because this whole thing is dumb and I'm just in my head. And I went back to go and watch my TV. Then a third knock happened, and the third knock was a lot louder than the other 2. And I remembered the business card telling me not to answer the third knock. So I didn't. And then about 40 seconds after that, I feel like is when I heard them walk away from my door. I never went to go check until the next morning. I opened my door, and I found the same business card that the fortune teller gave me. Sitting on my mat. That was confusing because I was pretty sure that I left it in my wallet. There was no reason that it should have been on my mat. Anyways, I flipped it over because I was looking at it because it was identical, except the sentence on the back changed. Instead of saying don't answer the third knock, this time it said good. So that weekend, I decided to drive back to the fairgrounds. Every single vendor was there except for her. All the same vendors. And I asked the booth that was next to her, I'm like, hey, where did that lady go? And they said, what do you mean? There was never a lady there. And I said, no, I literally went and got a reading done by her. They said that this booth next to us has been empty for the last 2 weekends. I still have the business card. I have tried looking up all the details that are on the card of her business. I can't find it anywhere. It's literally like it's non-existent. I've shown my friends, so they see the evidence too, that I have a business card for this apparently non-existent woman. Anyways, I'm not sure how she knew or what she knew or even where she's at to this day, but that was a pretty wild experience.
There's a particular set of rules that you must remember if you are to camp alone. Now, the first rule of camping alone is never set up your tent at night, because this is when you are the most vulnerable. And you cannot keep focused on what's behind you, what's around you, because you're focused on putting up the tent.
You want to get that baby up before sundown. Very important.
The second rule is always have a fire going. No matter what time of day it is, always keep that fire going and keep it nice and bright and tall. The third rule that you must remember if you're camping alone is when you go in your tent at night, make sure it is completely sealed up. No holes. Make sure everything is zipped and closed, because it's believed that stuff can even come in through the tiniest of cracks.
Yes.
Now, the fourth rule, when you are camping alone, you should never make noise at night. You should never whistle. You should never sing. You should try and keep it quiet as possible. Now, the fifth rule, which is the most important, is always have some sort of entertainment. Keep yourself occupied. Have some music. Have an audio book. But never let yourself start to wander and let your mind go, because that's when you are the most vulnerable. Now, there was this man named Jonathan. Jonathan decided he was going to go camping alone up in the Rocky Mountains.
Good job.
So he heads up to the spot, and he sets up his tent and gets his campsite ready. And he said he just remembered that, there were all these sounds of wildlife and the wind blowing, and it was just very peaceful and sort of like musical. And he said, he had his dog with him, and they sat around the fire for the bit, and it started to get late. So he decided to go into his tent. So as he goes in his tent, his dog lays over to the side of him, and soon he begins to doze off. Well, at some point in time in the night, he awakes to something shaking his tent. And he said he could hear this voice saying, "Please come out of the tent. Like, I need help. Help me, please. Get out of the tent. Help me." And so he's like, what's going on? Like, what's going on? So he goes to the zipper, he unzips the tent, and he goes outside. But when he gets out of the tent, there's nobody around.
Yeah.
It's just completely quiet. And it was eerily quiet because he couldn't hear the wind anymore. He couldn't hear the wildlife. And he said that the other strange thing was when he went to bed, there was this bright full moon overhead. But as he looked up in the sky, the moon was gone. There wasn't any clouds. It was a completely clear night. But the moon somehow had disappeared. So this kind of freaked him out a little bit. He goes back inside his tent and he zips up the zipper. Well, he lays down, and he said, his dog would come to the side of him or would lay by his feet, and that always made him feel a little better. So he said, he started to kind of doze off again. He said that's when he kept feeling like the dog, like rubbing his leg. And he's like, "What are you doing, boy? Like, I'm trying to sleep." And he said that's when he looks down at his feet.
Oh, no.
And there's nothing there. And when he looks over, his dog is right over here towards his head. So he is like, what's going on? Like, was there an animal or something? He unzips the tent, he goes outside, said, there was nothing out there. As he got ready to go back in his tent, he said he started to see these shadows. He said he could see figures that looked like they were tall, skinny, kind of lanky. They almost looked like they were crawling around amongst the trees. They were all around him. So he hurried up, got back inside his tent, and he zips it up. And he just said, he's just sitting there with his dog. And the whole time he thought it was strange because the dog didn't alert to any of this. It didn't bark. It was just quiet. It was just laying there. And he said that's when all of a sudden he felt this tent start to move. Something grabbed the tent and was dragging him. And he was so afraid that he passes out. And when he awakes, he said the tent was completely still, felt like everything was normal again. He said he thought it must have been a dream. Until he unzips the tent and he realizes he is a good distance away from his campsite. So he grabs his dog and they run out of there back to his vehicle, and they left that night. And they left the tent and everything behind.
Oh, no.
So it's important to remember, when you camp alone, always know the rules.
In my little creeps, because tonight I have a story about a shapeshifter for you. This came from Heather from Brown County, Indiana, and she says she believes her mom actually dated a shapeshifter. And maybe there's a perfectly logical and normal explanation for this, or maybe there really was a supernatural element going on, but either way, I think it's a good story. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest and most unsettling things that people have ever experienced. Heather says she already knows how this is going to sound. It sounds absolutely crazy, but she needs to tell someone about it, and she wants to hear what you all think. So when she was 16, she was working at a feed store just outside of the town where she lived, and this older man would come in every couple weeks to buy chicken feed and fencing supplies and mineral blocks, and he was probably mid to late 50s. She calls him Mike for this story, by the way. And he was very nice. He kept to himself, and he always paid in cash. And most of the people in the town knew him, but they didn't know a lot about him. As far as anyone knew, he was born and raised in the town. He was from there, and he just liked to keep to himself. So that's all fine and good. One day, her mom comes into the store to pick her up. She's getting off of her shift, and her mom meets Mike. Heather describes her mom as a very kind and lovely woman, but she always worked very hard because she was a single parent for most of Heather's life. Heather and her mom didn't come from money, and so her mom always had to work very hard, and thus she didn't spend a lot of time dating as Heather grew up. But she and Mike got to talking as she was waiting for Heather to get off her shift, and they ended up hitting it off. Mike asked Heather's mom out on a date, and she said yes, and they went out, and they continued going out for a few months until they were dating for about a year, and Mike suggested that both Heather and her mom move in with him. Everything had been going good in their relationship up until this point, and Heather and her mom were excited at this opportunity because they lived with Heather's grandmother, and the house was pretty small. Mike lived in an older but bigger house that she described as sort of log cabin-esque. It was set back in the woods on about 40 acres, and there was a small clearing where the house was, as well as an old barn. There was also a large chicken coop, an area where he kept goats, and enough trees surrounding the property that you couldn't see any neighbors' houses. Heather said it was an absolutely beautiful property during the day, but at first it took some getting used to at night because it was so dark out there. They moved in, and they both really liked it at first. Heather enjoyed having more space to sort of roam and just clear her head, and her mom liked it because Mike bought them both their own chickens and ducks upon moving in. Who doesn't like baby animals, right? And Mike also fixed up the house to make it more cozy because initially when they moved in, she described it as sort of a bachelor pad. He didn't really have any matching furniture or anything that made women feel comfortable. So he went out of his way to fix up some old things in the house, and he allowed both Heather and her mom to decorate it as they deemed appropriate. Heather says she did really like Mike. He was the type of person to go out, even in the middle of the night, to help a neighbor if one of their animals got loose, which actually she noticed actually happened kind of a lot. Sometimes if she was up early for school or getting ready to go to work on the weekend, he would come walking in around 6 in the morning, and she would say, "Where were you?" And he would say, "Oh, I was helping so-and-so find their lost goat." That's cool. That's fine. That's just the type of person she guessed he was. But then one night her mom woke her up a few months after living there, and she said, "Heather, I need you to wake up. Do you know anything about what Mike does at night?" And Heather said, "No, what are you talking about?" She said, "Well, I didn't want to stress you out, but I think he's cheating on me." This came as a shock to Heather because Mike did not seem like the type of person to cheat. He didn't even seem to have any friends as it was. And so she said, "Well, what makes you think that?" And her mom said, "Well, I keep waking up in the middle of the night and he's not here." Heather's like, "What do you mean he's not here?" And the mom says, "Well, his truck's always here, but he just disappears in the middle of the night and I have no idea where he goes." And so Heather says, "I think you should just ask him about it. Like, he really doesn't seem like the type." She meant it. There was really nowhere for him to go anyway. And so the next morning when Mike was sitting at the kitchen table having his coffee, her mom walked in the room and she said, "Mike, where do you go at night? I've noticed a few times over the last few months that I've woken up in the middle of the night and your truck is here, but you aren't. So where do you go?" And he barely looked up from his coffee and he just said, "I walk." And she says, "At 2 in the morning?" And he says, "Yeah, I've never really been a good sleeper." So Heather's mom says, "Well, where do you walk?" And he says, "The woods." So that was the answer, and they both just sort of accepted it because he hadn't given them a reason not to trust him anyway. But then Heather started paying attention, and she said she noticed a strange pattern. This continued for several months where he would be up and out in the middle of the night, and neither of them would wake up when he left, but sometimes they would wake up when he was coming back in, and it was usually between the hours of like 4 and 6 a.m. And one night, about a year after they first moved into Mike's house, Heather says she got home around midnight after hanging out with some friends, and she had gotten dropped off at the start of their long gravel driveway. And she was walking up to the house, and it was so dark that she was using her phone's flashlight. At the corner of her eye, near the edge of the house, she caught a glimpse of something, and it seemed to have 2 eyes that reflected the light. And so she shined the light, and she saw what looked to be a very, very large coyote. It wasn't walking or moving in a hurried pace, but it just seemed to be headed somewhere with intent and purpose. And so she got nervous because she thought that it was headed toward the chicken coop and the goat pen. She panicked because some of those chickens and the ducks back there were basically her and her mom's babies. She followed it around the side of the house, and she said she wasn't scared because she had been around coyotes before, and this didn't seem aggressive. It didn't seem even scared. So she started walking around the side of the house, and she got to where the chicken coop was, and she noticed that every chicken in the coop was asleep. There was no alarm call, not even a single bird moving. And so she swung her flashlight around, and she was looking for the coyote, but it was just gone. She stood out there for a few minutes and she sort of looked around for tracks because she wanted to make sure that the coyote had left. She didn't find any tracks or anything to indicate that it was still in the area, and so reluctantly she went back in the house, and her mom was actually still awake sitting at the kitchen table. Her mom looks at her and she's like, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, I just thought I saw a coyote back by the chicken coop. She's like, it's fine, I think it left. Like, why are you still awake? Because she noticed that her mom looked tired. And her mom was like, oh, I went to bed at like 8 o'clock, but I woke up and he's out walking again. There's like, what? Her mom's like, yeah, he left about like 20 minutes ago. I heard the back door close. Her mom's like, I don't know what it is. I just feel like something's off. And then when she said that, Heather said this like very strange feeling washed over her because she just felt.
Well, I know what this reminds me of now. Misfits on Netflix. So there's the guy from Umbrella Academy, and there's the guy from Game of Thrones on there, back before they were bigwigs. But yeah, the stepfather, or his mom's, he hates to call it his mom's boyfriend. He calls it his mom's roommate, or the person that lives with my mom. But turns out, ever since this hail, like, I guess it was a comet hail, something weird, glitch in the matrix, CERN BS going on here. Like, there was a crazy explosion, and then a lot of people went weird. Well, some people got certain powers, one being that this guy's mom's boyfriend, or a person that lives with his mom, turned into like a dog dude, but never formed into like the werewolf form or anything like that. Just would be naked, like out of his clothes, and would act like a dog, to the point of licking people on the face and stuff. But yeah, sorry, I just had to throw that in there. Misfits on Netflix. Don't miss it.
Like something was off with the timing. Then about a month after that, something happened that she said still sort of makes her sick to think about. So they had gone to this local community festival. It was about 30 minutes away from where they lived, and there was like a bunch of vendors and local businesses there, and there were some bands playing, and it was just a really great time when everyone in the area got together. Heather and her mom ended up running into some people that they hadn't seen in a long time, and they got to talking, and they ended up staying at the festival later than they intended. And Mike was getting increasingly frustrated that they were there. As the moon came out into full view, he kept looking at the sky, he kept checking his watch, and he kept indicating that he was ready to leave. Finally, around 10:30 p.m., he stood up from where he was sitting, and he was like, we need to get home now. Heather's mom just sort of laughed, and she was like, no, it's fine. We're all catching up. We never stay out late. Let's just hang out. Let's have a good time. Everything is fine. And he's like, you know what? No, I don't feel good. I think I got food poisoning from one of the vendors. I'm ready to go. But I really don't feel well. We all need to leave. Like, let's go. I'm going to go get the truck. And Heather's like, no, like, if you're sick, then you go. I'm having a good time. Me and Heather are going to stay. Heather and her mom's family friends were like, it's fine. If you're not feeling well, just go. We'll drive them home in a little bit. Like, feel better soon. And within 2 minutes, he was gone. Heather's mom made a comment about how she thought that he was being dramatic. And also keep in mind, this was a man that dried his own venison jerky. He's not the type of man to complain about an upset tummy, but they said, whatever, it is what it is. And a few hours later, their friends drove them home. They got back. It was around 1 a.m, and Mike's truck was in the driveway, but every light in the house was off, and they thought he was in bed. Heather went to her room. Her mom went to their room. But a few minutes later, she came to Heather's room, and she said, he's gone. They checked the door, and his boots were gone, and Heather's mom was furious. So she waited up, and around 3:30 in the morning, the back door opened, and Mike walked in, and he was completely covered in dirt and mud. He had leaves in his hair. Clothes were soaked, and on the top of his left shoulder was a horrible, gaping, nasty wound. Heather's mom jumped up and she goes, oh my God, what happened? And he said, I slipped climbing over an old barbed wire fence in the woods. And Heather's mom is like, at 3 a.m? And he said, yeah, I just needed air. And so she grabs him and she looks closer. Edges of the wound were already blackened and sort of scabbed over. The puncture itself was almost perfectly round, as if something had gone into him instead of sliced him. He wanted to take him to the ER, but he absolutely refused, and by morning, he had stitched it himself. He said that doctors were a waste of time, and Heather's mom was pretty mad about this and concerned that he was going to get an infection. But around noon that day, a neighbor pulled up on his side-by-side, which I looked it up, and it looks like that seems to be some type of four-wheeler. He comes up to the house, and he knocks, and he looks shaken when they answer the door, and he's like, hey, I just came to warn y'all, like, you guys better keep your animals locked up, because last night I saw the biggest gray wolf I've ever seen stalking across my property. He said it was around 3 a.m. I'd been up drinking after I came home from that festival. I was sitting on my back porch, and I took a shot at it. He goes, it's crazy because gray wolves aren't in southern Indiana, but he says, I know for a fact I hit it right here, but I tried to track it. I couldn't find it.
Now he's
Neighbor
gonna
says,
have
I
that
watched
injury.
it stumble into the trees. I know for a fact I hit it in the shoulder, and I followed it into the tree line thinking I would find it about 50 yards in, but I know it's still out there because I didn't find the body. He said, so I just figured I'd come over and warn y'all and tell y'all to keep an eye on your animals. And at this point, Mike had walked into the room, and Heather says she stole a glance at him.
Yeah, starts growling.
And he was sort of standing with his hand underneath his flannel, with his palm across the bandaged shoulder. As he listened to the neighbor, his expression never changed, but after the neighbor was done talking, he simply thanked him and wished him a good day. Heather says it wasn't long after the neighbor had come to their property to warn them about the wolf that she found enormous canine prints around the chicken coop in their yard. They were far larger than any coyote print she had ever seen, but oddly, every few feet they were smeared, as if whatever had made them had changed the way that it was walking. Followed them toward the tree line, but by the time they reached the woods, there were no more tracks to follow. Even stranger, their chickens were never harmed, their goats were never harmed, their ducks were never harmed. They never lost a single animal in the entire time they lived there, despite very evident canine activity around their property and the neighbors constantly complaining about sightings of a gray wolf. Mike never stopped walking at night, and that's actually the reason that Heather's mom and him eventually broke up. She said that she couldn't get over this inability to trust him. She said she never got over the feeling that he was hiding something despite not knowing what it was. He ended up moving back in with Heather's grandmother, and she hadn't seen him since. But a few years later, she was in the area and she decided to drive past the property. The house was empty with all the lights off, and she noticed the barn was collapsing. And so she drove a little further ways down the road, and she saw a neighbor outside, and so she pulled off to ask about Mike. The neighbor actually laughed and said, yeah, he was actually the strangest man I've ever met in my life. But yeah, he passed away a few years ago. Apparently found him in the woods, and it looked like he had been out there for a while and succumbed to the conditions of nature. But there was no foul play involved, and authorities had ruled it simply an accident. But Heather says she still wonders about it. Maybe there really was a logical explanation, and the wound really was from a barbed wire fence, and maybe he really did like taking long walks in the middle of the night. Or maybe some of the oldest stories exist because sometimes people have seen things that they're not supposed to. She says she truly doesn't know what Mike really was, but she does know that a lot of the nights he disappeared were on full moons. Heather is her real name. She will be reading the comments. Drop your thoughts and theories. I would love to read through them. And if you have a spooky, scary story time of your own, we would love to hear it.
A lady brought her son to me. He was 15 years old. No. This motherfucker couldn't even talk English no more. He was watching a lady on YouTube. She said the kid was like watching, trying to learn how to do the tarot, right? He was just like, he started getting infatuated with it. And then one day he just lost his shit. Started talking in some other language. Because when I go into spirit, because I'm a mamba, I speak other languages too that I don't know. So yeah, we ended up having to cleanse this kid because of what he saw on YouTube. And you know, there's also practitioners that steal your energy. That's what they do.
People will go to someone thinking that they're going to get help or learn from this person, but yet the practitioner has an ulterior motive.
Yes.
Very unethical people. A lot of unethicals doing the work.
How do you know you're going to the correct person?
I taught my husband when I first got with him. I took him to a botanica in my town that I know does bad work. And they have things placed in their shop to steal your energy. So I told him, I said, I'm going to take you in here. And I said, in the feeling that you feel, I don't never want you to forget it. And if you ever feel it anywhere, I want you to go the other way and get the fuck out. So we walked in the store, going around, he's like getting lightheaded. And I said, now we could go. I said, what you just felt in there was bad work. If you ever feel that, hurry up and go.
This story was sent to me by someone who asked to remain anonymous. They claimed every word is true, and after reading it, I can understand why they didn't want their name attached to it. My grandfather spent his entire life in the Appalachian Mountains. And before he died, he made me promise
the Appalachian Mountains.
One thing. If I ever heard someone whistle my name from the woods...
This is 100% true story.
Oh my God, Grandma.
That happened to a woman in Madison,
put your eye drops
Wisconsin. Now, there was this woman named Sherry who moved into this house with her 2 children in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, she said, at the time, she didn't believe in anything supernatural. She really thought that was a bunch of nonsense. But she said, right away when they moved in, she would notice, out of the corner of her eye, sometimes shadows moving across the walls. She would hear strange noises that she couldn't explain. But she said for the most part, it was just a normal house. One night, she's upstairs in her bedroom, and she's folding laundry. She hears talking coming from her son's room. So she makes her way over to his room. The door's closed. And she hears her son having a full-on conversation with someone. And she's like, who is he talking to, at 12:30 at night? So she opens the door, and when she looks in his room, he is not in his bed. So she starts yelling for him. She looks down and sees him next to the side of his bed, on his knees, crouched down, with his head under the bed, talking to someone. And she's like, hey, who are you talking to? Like, who's under there? And her son's like, I can't tell you. And she said, what do you mean you can't tell me? Like, who's under the bed? And he's like, I can't say. He'll get mad. And she's like, what? Who's under there? So she runs over to the bed and she looks underneath there. It's empty. There's nothing under there. So she's like, you know what? Just get back in bed. Like, just stop, doing whatever you're doing. Several weeks pass, and like on a regular basis, she keeps finding her son talking to someone under the bed, except there's no one there. So after a few weeks of this happening, she thinks maybe something is wrong with her son. So she takes him to this child therapist. The therapist assesses him and says, he seems completely fine. It's probably just his imagination. So several months pass and he keeps on doing this. Well, one day she's sitting down in the living room with him and they're talking when she notices he has some scratches and bruises all over his body. And she's like, where did you get those scratches and bruises from? Like, what's going on? And he's like, I can't say, I can't tell you. And she's like, yes, you have to tell me, what is going on with you? And finally he breaks down and he starts crying and stuff. And he just starts freaking out. And then he runs up to his room. So the mom, at this time is like, I don't know what to do. Like, what is going on with my son? Like, she's just panicking. Later that night, she's awoken to her son screaming in his bedroom. She runs as fast as she can. She goes in his room. She finds him halfway underneath the bed. He's grabbing onto the bed frame, and it looks like something is pulling him under the bed.
Oh, no.
So she immediately grabs him, pulls him out from under the bed. She looks under there. There's no one there. So she's like, you know what? This is weird. Like, you're sleeping with me tonight. You're going to be in bed with me tonight. So they go back to her bedroom. He lays down. He falls asleep. She's sitting in bed. She can't sleep. She's freaked out about this whole situation. When all of a sudden she hears, shh, hey, come under the bed. She's like, what? She looks over. Her son is sleeping. But then once again she hears, hey, come here under the bed. I need to talk to you. And it's like a man's voice. And she's like, no, who are you? Like, go away. And the man's like, come on, get under the bed. I need to tell you something. And she's like, no, I'm not going under the bed. And she said this man, whoever he was, just started yelling obscenities and getting really angry. So she grabs her son. Wow. They get out of the house. And she said she left that night and never went back.
Yeah.
And still to this day, that house sits there. And she said she's talked to the neighbors. And they said since she's moved, several families have lived there and they move out immediately.
This is what happened to us for playing the Ouija board. So this guy says that this happened to him 4 years ago when he was 14 years old. He admits that his friend loved watching scary videos, scary stories, anything that would cause them to be scared they were interested in. And on this particular night, they were having a sleepover at one of the friend's house. His friend's parents were not there that night. They had the older brother be in charge, but the older brother basically said, hey, you could do whatever you want, don't break anything, and he locked himself up in his room. One of his friends ends up pulling a big box out of his backpack and it was a Ouija board. The kid said it belonged to his dad and that they never used it. He remembers his friend put it on the table and they all started laughing, they all started joking, and they didn't touch it until it was midnight. It was between midnight and 1 in the morning. They turned off all the lights and they just had this little lantern on. And they did read the instructions that were on the box. Don't play alone, don't make fun, don't take this as a joke, and always make sure to say goodbye. They all end up holding hands very nervously, and then they all place their face.
So here's another thing I gotta tell you guys about this camping trip. My eldest was going to bring her Ouija board, and she ended up forgetting it. And she stayed the night. She was gonna go hostess this job for this rich couple for the 4th of July, and she's going to come back with her Ouija board, and we were going to dink around in the forest with it. I took a picture. You guys, I'm going to share my pictures so you can see them. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow night. But yeah, there was an eye in the sky watching us leave the campsite, and I had to pull over and take a picture of that. And it really tripped me out because I'm like, we're supposed to do the Ouija board later, and the last time I did mess with the Ouija board was when I was in MRP from Marine Corps combat training. Oh my gosh. And it wasn't a bad experience for me. I was really excited. The first time I was pissed because it wouldn't let me talk to my mom, but the second time I thought for sure it was my mom. But after that experience, I had my first sleep paralysis within, I want to say days, but it could have been a week, but I want to say days. Is it that I didn't talk to my mom and it was something bad, or was it that I did get to talk to my mom, but speaking through that portal, something got through and attached to me, or has attached to me several times throughout my life? I don't know. But yeah, we're hoping for next camping trip, so perhaps the 29th of this month. I don't know. We'll have to keep y'all posted on the whatnot. But yeah, I'm pretty hardcore, pretty strong, but when it comes to that shit, I'm a puss. Okay, but I really don't want to.
Fingers on the planchette. They asked if there was a spirit present. 2 or 3 minutes passed after they asked that and nothing happened. He admits that he was about to tell his friends that this thing was not working, it was a joke, and that was when the planchette was slowly starting to move and it went all the way to yes. They all started looking at each other thinking maybe one of them was the one pushing it. He looks at his friends and makes them all swear that it wasn't them moving it, and they all said that they were not moving it. They decided to ask another question just to see where it would go to, and they decided to ask it what time it was. The planchette ends up moving to 12:55 a.m. He ends up getting his cell phone out, and it was exactly the time that the Ouija board said it was. The ambiance changed, like they were not laughing anymore. This was not a game. That's when one of his friends ends up asking the question, what kind of spirit are you? The planchette didn't move so easily this time, but then it started moving to M-A-L-O, which means malo, which means bad in English. He says that when he spelled out M-A-L-O, bad, that he felt a chill go down his back. Before they can even ask another question, they heard as if somebody punched really hard on the floor they were at, which meant that they would have to be under them, which is just an empty room where they would put random stuff in. They all stayed very still, and then they heard again another punch to the floor where they were sitting at. The thing is, where they were at, they just had to look out of the door and they could see the stairs that led down and the door where you can enter and then eventually be below them. As they're looking down there, that door begins to open slowly, and then out of nowhere it just slammed shut so hard it made all of them jump up from where they were sitting at. He did not want to keep playing, but eventually when they all looked at the planchette that was still in that table, he said that the planchette was moving by itself without anybody even touching it. By itself, it started lettering T-E-V-E-O, which in Spanish means te veo, which in English means I see you. You see me? No, don't see me. And instantly after, Ouija board saying I see you, they heard one last hit below them again. One of the friends immediately screams that they need to close the session and say goodbye. They said goodbye several times and they all removed their fingers from that planchette. Now, he was supposed to stay the night there, but he said fuck that. He called his mom still shaking, telling her that he felt sick and she needed to come and pick him up. That night, he returned home and he was silent. He was so quiet. He was thinking about what the fuck had just happened. He thought to himself, well, at least I'm far away from when it happened. Everything will be fine. Nothing is gonna happen here in my house. He goes to his room. He lays down. He says that he falls asleep almost immediately. However, around 3:40 in the morning, he explains that he was awoken because he almost heard like a whispering. When he fully wakes up, he says that he hears the whisper almost like if it was really close to his ear, and it says, I see you. Oh my god. Obviously, seriously, he gets up and he turns the light on, and he says that if you sit up, right in front of his bed is a really big window and you can see like the garden, like the yard outside of his house. Past the garden you can see the street, but he says that in the street he saw this really dark like shadow just standing there. He couldn't make out who it was. He just knew that it was someone standing there and like watching him directly into his window. His heart started beating so fast he thought he was gonna faint, but he immediately gets up, runs to his parents' bedroom. He tells them that there was somebody outside. His dad gets up with a lantern, with a gun, and he goes out there to see who the fuck is outside of the house. However, he doesn't see anybody. He doesn't find anybody out there. He ends up telling them that they did play the Ouija board that night and what happened, and they were both really mad at him. They obviously tell him that that is not a game, that is not for fun, like that thing is serious, and they went as far as to get a priest to come and bless the house the next day. And they also talked to all of his friends' parents so that they would do the same thing, which I think it's nice. Like, they even thought about them, but like, yeah, y'all got in trouble. I just know y'all got in trouble. It has been 4 years, and he said that he will never forget that night. He will remember everything in detail, and he will never play with a Ouija board again.
Never say never.
My mom was a mimic.
What?
If you like true scary Appalachia stories,
Girl.
then this is the account for you.
What?
I live in eastern Kentucky, and I have a lot of true scary stories that have happened to me personally, and I would love to share them with you.
Chocolate milk goo. Okay. My mom was a mimic. Let's go, girl. Let's see. I'm tripped out already.
But here's the
like,
thing.
you got me.
This is a new account, so could you give me a follow if you don't care? Also, this is a series, and this is video 16.
Okay.
I was asleep in my mom's room. My mom's room, I lived in an old house, and my room was actually like a part of the old structure, and then my mom had a room built on that was like this big master bedroom. So I'm laying in bed. I'm about to go to sleep in her room. We had watched movies in there, and then my mom just kind of left me in there. Well, she had a window over here, and the blinds were like, you could just barely see through the blinds. They were cracked. But we had security lights all around our property. So if anybody walked past them or anything, they would activate, but they didn't just stay on. That way it would let us know if someone was around the house.
Yes.
Well, in this scenario, I'm laying down in bed, and I hear a whistle. That's not uncommon.
That's naval.
In Appalachia to hear a whistle or something of that nature.
That was a naval whistle. Like, attention. Or listen.
I ignored it. I know what you're thinking. You ignored that. But, yeah, in Appalachia, that's what you do. You hear stuff like that, and then you ignore it. That's just what you do. If you acknowledge it, that's when things start to get a little weird, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They like attention.
Yes.
Whatever
Don't
it is.
we all?
So, anyway, I'm laying in the bed, and then it's whatever it is, it starts like scratching at the window. So I don't see anything though. The security light's not going on. So then I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not gonna freak out yet. You know, I feel like most kids would have freaked out by now. By the way, so the fact that I didn't freak out yet, pretty impressive. Now that I'm looking back on it.
This, at this point in the story, is when you, as a child, reach down and grab your sheet and blanket combo or sheet and quilt combo, whatever you got going on. Sling yourself under the sheet and blanket combo. Pull said sheet and blanket up to just below your eyeballs or up to your forehead and then back down, just to make sure you got the whole thing covered, because that is your shield. It actually works. believe it or not.
So
I think because you have faith in it, it always worked for me several different times. Doesn't mean things don't linger sometimes outside of said shield. But we are very powerful beings.
I start hearing something outside the window, and it almost sounds like whispers, and then the security light comes on, go past the window.
Oh.
And it's tall. It covered the whole window, and then it was gone.
It's big.
So at this point, I panicked. And that's my son.
Big bear chase me.
If you hear him in the background.
Yes.
But at this point, I panic. And I freak out, and then I scream out for my mom, okay? I'm hollering. Because we live in a huge house. If you've seen any of my old videos, like I said, it's built on, okay? So my house is huge, and it's a maze, and it's all one level. So not long after I screamed, I get this little like tap at the door, but it's kind of weird because she doesn't open the door, and she's talking soft, but it sounds like my mom. And I didn't question it, okay? She was like, "Hey babe, you okay? I heard you hollering." And I was like, I think I seen something go past my window, Mom. And then she goes, "Oh, okay, it's probably nothing. Probably a bird. Ow,
probably a bird.
Something." And I was like, "I don't know, Mom. It was really big." And she was like, "I wouldn't worry about it, sweetie. It's okay. Okay." And so she goes back, I'm assuming. And I'm just laying there, and then literally a minute later, my mom opens the door, and she's looking at me, and she was like, "Hey, I heard you hollering." Kind of baffled about it, but I was like, just play along, you know, because at this point, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So I look at my mom.
Just kidding.
You know, and I repeat the whole story.
Oh my gosh.
And she acts completely different, okay? She's like, "Come with me." And she said, "I want you to stay right here." And she makes me stand next to where we had a landline. Y'all probably don't even know what a landline is.
Yep.
But I know some of my viewers are a little older, but basically we didn't have a cell phone when I was a kid, and I was standing right next to the house phone. And she was like, "I'm gonna go get my gun." By the way, my mom was badass. She was like, "I'm gonna go get my gun and walk around the house and make sure everything's okay." My dad was at work. My dad was at work, and she was like, "I'm just gonna go around the house. We'll make sure everything's okay." And also, I should add, it was unusual that he was on night shift. He was usually day shift. I think something was just going on at work. I don't know.
People getting sick.
But I'm standing by the house phone. My mom makes her rounds around the house. I'm guessing nothing happened. She came back in. She was like, "Everything's okay." And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna sleep with you if you don't." I'm like, I'm gonna go sleep with you on the couch. And she was like, "Okay, that's fine." And then as we're laying on the couch, I'm on one end and she's on the other. I look down at her. So
No.
Why did you knock on my door originally and you told me that it was probably a bird and to not worry about it? I was like, "What made you come back and change your mind?" And she said, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah. A doppelganger.
People throw away furnitures.
I have had a doppelganger for so many freaking years, and I was like, why would this thing want to take the form of my life? Oh my gosh. It's so turmoilic. It's been crazy for most of it. But yeah, from Man, I want to say the last 20 years, this thing's been running around, so far as I know.
Don't be so quick to bring it home. I am back with another spooky story, and you may not want to watch this one at night. So we're going to call the person who submitted the story Joyce. Joyce said this happened in 2022. Till this day, she refuses to have a mirror in her bedroom. She lives in a city where there are a lot of wealthy neighborhoods. She says if you've ever driven through one, you know rich people throw away the craziest things. Perfectly good couches, expensive coffee table, designer lamps, artwork, things that would cost thousands of dollars. People would literally drive around on trash day hoping to find treasures. So one Saturday afternoon, she was driving through one of those neighborhoods after visiting a friend when she saw the most beautiful full-length mirror sitting neatly against the curb.
Oh, wow.
The mirror wasn't dirty or broken. It had this heavy antique frame carved with flowers, vines, and little faces that looked like angels. Glass itself was flawless. There wasn't even a scratch on it. Joyce knocked on the door of the house just to make sure it wasn't a mistake. No one answered, and the mirror was sitting beside the other trash waiting for pickup. She loaded the mirror into her car and took it home.
Oh my god.
Big mistake. First few nights, nothing happened. Joyce had the mirror leaned against her bedroom wall because she had planned on hanging it later. She kept catching movements in the corner of her eye. She blamed it on being tired. You know how sometimes your brain thinks it sees something move? That's what Joyce assumed. Then she noticed something strange. Whenever she walked past this mirror, it felt like someone else was in the room, as if they were watching. One night, she was folding laundry while listening to music. She happens to glance at the mirror. She says she swear her reflection wasn't folding clothes. She blinked and everything matched again. At this point, she laughed because at this point, she's thinking that her eyes are playing tricks on her. After that, she stopped looking into it for too long, just for her mental health. She started having really weird dreams. Every single night, she dreamed that she was standing in front of the mirror. Except in the dream, the reflection wasn't her. It looked like her. There were specific details that were off. Like the smile was weird, the eyes in the reflection looked darker. It never copied her movements. Sometimes she would just stand there in the dream, begging herself not to turn around, because somehow she knew something was behind her. Every dream ended the same way. The reflection would whisper, "Don't look behind you." Joyce would wake up soaked in sweat. Things started happening while she was awake. Bedroom door would slowly creak open sometimes. The dog refused to come inside her room anymore. The dog would stand in the hallway, shaking and whining, staring directly at the mirror. It was so bad that if she tried to carry the dog inside, he would claw at her until she lets him leave. And then she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Sometimes when she walked into the room, she could see someone standing in the mirror. Not clearly, it was like a dark silhouette. The second she would actually look, it was gone. At this point, she's getting a weird vibe from this mirror. She started sleeping with the mirror covered by a blanket. The activities got so much worse. Yeah, I hate part 2s, but leave a comment for part 2, because this story is so long and it gets so much worse.
On the night of October 10th, 2004, 34-year-old Andrew Kerr, his wife Diana, and their 3-month-old son Kelly sat around a campfire at Bathurst.
How did these guys get a picture of my dog? Seriously.
Bay in far north Queensland. They were on an extended camping trip that they had been invited on by some family friends, an older couple named Alicia and Bill Sorahan. The Sorahans had also brought along their adult son Jason and his family and a lot of their grandkids. So there were a lot of people on this camping trip. And thus far, they had had an amazing time. They were on day 11 of this trip, and every day the men would go out on their boat and go fishing, whilst the women and children had plenty of trails to explore through the woods near their campsite. And they, of course, would also play on the beach and in the ocean. It was a great time. On this evening, they had made a campfire, they cooked up a nice fish dinner that the men had caught, and they sat around eating and chatting well into the night, until about 11 p.m. At that point, the families decided, it was time to turn in. And so each of the families made their way to their respective tents. They had 5 different tents set up. In one, you had Andrew, his wife Diana, and their little baby Kelly. In another, you had the grandparents, Alicia and Bill, and one of their granddaughters. Then Jason and his wife, and then some of the kids in the other tents. They were about 50 meters up the beach away from the ocean, so well away from the ocean, about 165 feet. And then they had some lights at their campsite. And before everybody went to bed, Bill went around with a flashlight. He surveyed their campsite, made sure everything was safe. They had seen some dingoes early in the trip. He wanted to make sure nothing like that was around. But when he was satisfied that everything looked in order, he made his way to the generator that powered those lights they had. He shut the generator off, and that, of course, plunged the campsite into darkness. And then Bill went to bed with his wife, Alicia, and one of the granddaughters in his tent. Well, around 3:45 in the morning, little baby Kelly woke up and he started to fuss. It was time for his morning bottle. So, of course, his mother, Diana, she got up, got his milk. She fed him, and when he had eaten and gone back to sleep, she placed him in his bassinet, which was in the back corner of their tent, furthest away from the entrance of the tent, and then she laid down to go back to sleep next to her husband, Andrew. But before she drifted off, she heard a strange noise that she did not recognize. It was just this thud. It sounded like something heavy fell on the sand. She had no idea what it was, and so she laid there for just a little bit listening, and sure enough, a short time later, thud. She laid there, thud, and she started to get a little bit worried. By the fourth or so thud, she noticed it sounded like it was getting closer and closer and closer.
Maybe something grabbed your baby and was like lugging it. But if so, why is the baby not crying? Oh, never mind. I'm not going to say that's gross.
Closer. And then finally, thud on the sand. And at this point, it sounded like it was right there.
Yes.
And that's because it was right there.
Yeah.
She sat up and she looks out, and even though it's pitch black, she can easily see what it is. At the entrance of their tent, which was apparently open, she is staring into the face of a 4.2 meter long or 14 foot long saltwater crocodile. This animal had crawled out of the ocean and crawled directly straight to their tent, and it was now at their entrance. You can see on pictures the path this thing took, dragging itself through the sand. She's looking at this thing. She obviously immediately screams. She goes, "Andrew, crocodile!" Her husband...
Do you think this is why they make like 2, maybe 3 different entrances and exits on a tent, when in fact, like, you don't even need that many? All you need is a knife, so you could just run and slice the side of the tent and get the hell out of there if you have to. Because fuck a lot of messing with some zippers to get out of there when Michael Myers or a crocodile or whatever could be coming for you. But anyways, no. That's just a nice, tasty little treat set up for this thing to eat.
He jolts awake, but just as she screams that and he wakes up, this crocodile goes lunging through the entrance of the tent. It goes inside the tent and it clamps its jaws down on Andrew's leg. Andrew immediately begins to scream, but he's not screaming because he's in pain. He's screaming at Diana.
Surprise.
He's saying, get the baby, get Kelly out of here. And so Diana, she turns and she grabs little Kelly out of his bassinet. But instead of just running around the crocodile and getting Kelly out of there to safety, she cannot bear the thought of her husband being taken by this thing. The crocodile already has Andrew.
Take Kelly to safety, come back and get your dumb husband. Jesus, Pete.
Dragged out of the tent, and it's dragging him across.
Somebody should survive, but I guess if you do save the baby and you and your husband die because of this saltwater crocodile, whatever the hell it is, the dingo will most likely have ate your baby.
The sand down towards the ocean. So Diana is screaming, and she runs and she grabs onto her husband's hand, and she's in a tug of war with this crocodile over Andrew's body. But she quickly realizes that this is not a tug of war she is going to win. This is a huge animal, and it's pulling Andrew down the beach, and it's pulling her with Andrew. But she will not let go of her husband. Meanwhile, the screams, of course, wake up everybody in the campsite. Nobody knows what's going on, but they can tell by the volume and pitch of the screams that something horrible is.
And in our campsite sounds scary. Hold on. For some reason it muted. Okay. There is. Why is this not playing sound? Where the heck is the speaker? Oh, here it is. Let's go.
Mother, who is 60 years old. She jumps up and she goes running out into the darkness with no weapons, no flashlight, no nothing. She just goes running to the sound of the screams.
Yeah.
When she gets there, Diana is screaming at Alicia. She's going, "It's a crocodile. It's got Andrew." And Alicia, without any hesitation, this grandmother goes running up to this massive crocodile and she leaps on its back. I don't know if she was going to go try and gouge its eyes or what her plan was, but she leaps on its back. And amazingly, this apparently startles the crocodile enough to where it lets Andrew go. And he's able to kind of scramble and crawl away. At some point, it had apparently also bitten him on the arm, because at this point, his arm is shattered. The bones in his hand is all shattered, and one of his legs is completely shattered. But he kind of crawls away from the crocodile's mouth. At the same time, the crocodile throws its head back hard. And when it does that, it hits Alicia right in the face, and it breaks her nose and breaks some of her teeth, nearly knocks her unconscious. And Alicia goes rolling off the crocodile, and the crocodile wheels around and grabs onto Alicia and starts mauling her. Well, Alicia's adult son, Jason, he heard, of course, this commotion.
Wow.
And thank goodness.
This story is insane, you guys.
He had a 9mm pistol, and he had the wherewithal to, before he goes running to check out the scene, he grabbed that handgun. So he goes running through the dark, and when he arrives on the scene, this crocodile already has his mother, Alicia, in its mouth. It's mauled one of her legs severely, and now it's got her by the arm, and it's just ripping at her arm and dragging her across the sand. Well, Jason goes running up to this crocodile, and he kind of leaps on its back, and he puts the barrel of his pistol right on the back of this crocodile's head, and he fires 2 rounds. Boom, boom, right into the back of the crocodile's head. Doesn't kill the crocodile. The crocodile's still ripping at his mother.
Oh my God.
2 more
Eyeballs,
shots.
eyeballs.
Boom, boom. And after that 4th shot, the crocodile goes limp, its jaws relax, and Alicia's able to pull herself free out of its jaws. But it is a massive amount of damage. Her arm is basically just hanging off by some flesh. It almost completely ripped her arm off. Her leg is shattered, nose broken. She's got various lacerations all over her body.
You go, Grandma.
She's got teeth that are broken. She's in really bad shape. Well, Alicia's husband, Bill, the grandfather, he does not think that he can get Andrew, the first guy, the husband who was attacked. He does not think he can get him and his wife to the hospital. Alicia is in a little worse shape, so he decides to get his wife in a vehicle, and he drives her to the nearest help, which is a ranger station like 4 hours away. He gets his wife there, where he alerts them, and they send a helicopter out. The helicopter picks up Andrew. Meanwhile, right after the attack, the family, they made some makeshift tourniquets for both Andrew and Alicia using duct tape and towels. And so they were able to stop the bleeding. And so both of them made it to the hospital okay. Helicopter took Andrew there. Vehicle took Alicia there. Both of them underwent extensive surgeries, but both of them kept all their limbs. They were able to reattach Alicia's arm. And she's got some gnarly scars.
Wow, Grandma.
So, of course, does Andrew. But both of them, luckily, made full recoveries, other than, of course,
that's
their
badass
scars, which you can tell they got mauled by a crocodile.
Yeah.
Alicia,
seriously,
she was incredibly brave, incredibly heroic. Again, I don't know what her plan was, but she reacted immediately, just dove on this thing. For that, she received multiple awards, several medals. Her favorite one was from Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. He presented her with an award for bravery. Steve Irwin actually went and visited them in the hospital, and she said that was her favorite part of everything about the whole experience. Afterwards, of course, she didn't enjoy being attacked by the crocodile. But she actually wanted to go and work for Steve Irwin. I don't know if he accepted her or not, but Steve Irwin, unfortunately, before she would get the chance, would pass away, of course, in 2006, as we all know. But pretty incredible story. This woman threw herself on this thing without thinking about herself whatsoever.
Yeah, dude,
and
seriously.
of course, the outcome could have been much worse if it wasn't for everybody coming together, and if it wasn't for Jason, thinking to grab that handgun and just having it in general could have been so much worse.
So it works. Wow, that's awesome.
My cousin unalived 2 women and is now serving a life sentence. Hi.
Hi. Hey. I had a murder death killer here in my house too, and he was dating my niece. Luckily, we kicked him out after 2 threats to the lives of those I love in this household and the next. Then he ended up going to prison for actually taking somebody's life. These people are sick.
Everybody, welcome back to Confessions with Jordan, where I take anonymous submitted confessions that are untold and unbelievable.
What an angel.
They range from scary to dark to traumatic to embarrassing. I post weekly, and if you have any confessions you'd like to share, you can either submit them to confessions@jordan@gmail.com or through TikTok. I grew up with my cousin we will call Evan. We were only 8 months apart in age, so our parents would always send us off to play together while they were visiting. We would normally coordinate, rather our parents did, for us to stay at our grandparents' together for 3 weeks each summer. I never really liked Evan that much. He was family, so we got along well enough, but I was never excited to see him, I remember. He was brash and intimidating and awkward. In the end, I guess I'm not too surprised after finding out what he did. He never really seemed to care when someone got hurt. One summer, I crashed my bike pretty badly. My knee was split open and I was crying. Instead of helping, he just stood there watching me. I remember being angry and asking him why he wasn't getting an adult or bending down to help me. And he shrugged and said, "I just wanted to see what you'd do," and continued watching. I was never really sure what he meant, but I stood up angrily and stormed back home with my bleeding leg. He also lied constantly, even when there was no reason to. He'd tell stories that were obviously impossible and then get angry when someone questioned him. He would switch personalities depending on who he was around. Adults thought he was polite. Kids knew him as quiet and easy to explode if you upset him. Very sensitive. But his brother had drowned in the pool while they were both swimming together after getting trapped under a large water toy when they were young, so everyone cut him some slack. In high school, he became quiet.
Well, now that I know this individual, never mind. That would be judgmental of me to say, but I see in my head, this person wasn't in danger like his little brother was, or maybe he was for a little second. Them being twins, I guess? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the other one was the little brother, and he was. He gets out and has to see what happens.
He didn't have any close friends, but he always seemed to know everything about everybody. He spent hours driving around town at night for no particular reason. If you had asked him what he'd been up to, he never had an answer. We drifted apart after graduation. I moved away for work, and he would occasionally send me a message asking weird questions like whether I still remembered certain back roads or certain abandoned buildings that we had found as kids. 6 years later, I was on the phone with him catching up, and he told me that a woman in his town had recently went missing after leaving her work, and they hadn't found her yet. The whole town was searching and upset. He said the news had noted she was wearing a red blazer, so he has been doing his part by taking his normal nightly drives around, trying to help out by looking for the red blazer in the woods or on the side of the road. I looked it up after the phone call because I was curious if it would be anyone I had known growing up. Police said she apparently worked at a hospital and was getting off at around 11 p.m., and cameras saw her leave to the parking lot but never come out. There was no reliable footage of the entrance and exits of the parking garages, but her car was there days later. No cameras saw her walk back into the hospital. The investigation went cold. 3 weeks later, Evan called me again. "Do you think they'll ever find that woman?" he asked. I said probably not, honestly, if it's been this long. I wonder if she ran away or if she's dead. I watched a lot of true crime, and if someone is missing for 6 weeks without a good reason, it's never a good thing.
No.
There was a pause, and then he said, "It's amazing how someone can just disappear." I specifically remember him using the word amazing. I laughed and I said amazing, and then I called him an asshole. He had replied and said something along the lines of, "I'm just saying that people think when something like this happens that someone would have noticed something, but they just don't. I'm surprised stuff like this doesn't happen more often, honestly." It was an odd conversation, but so was he, hence why he wasn't my favorite. A few months later, we went for lunch at a small bar and grill while I visited the area. One of the big TVs was playing the news and had her picture up, missing for 3 months. He stopped what he was saying mid-sentence and just stared at the TV, no expression. Until they switched topics on the TV, and then he just kept talking like nothing had happened. Almost 18 months after the first disappearance, another woman vanished. She had been driving home after visiting her sister. Apparently, this time there was a witness that had said they saw the woman on the side of the road with a flat tire the evening of her disappearance on a back road in the nighttime. The witness stopped to help, and the woman said that her husband was on the way and that she was fine. She was never seen again. Apparently, a large clump of her hair and some gasoline was found in her SUV. Wow. A week after the second disappearance, Evan texted me, "You still working late? Sometimes. Why? Just wondering. Okay. Don't take the back roads at night. Okay, why? They aren't safe." I remember showing the messages to my fiance because they struck me as strange, but what are we going to do with some odd messages? Not much. I hadn't even considered anything criminal at this point. The break in the investigation came from traffic cameras. Investigators were able to track a vehicle that appeared near both scenes and stayed long enough to be suspicious. It belonged to my cousin. When police searched his garage, they reportedly found the driver's license of both females along with the red blazer from the first woman and a ring from the second woman in a box. I remember sitting in my apartment staring at the television while reporters showed his high school yearbook photo. It didn't feel... I felt ashamed. The detectives interviewed me a few days later, and I told them anything I could think of. They went through our messages on the phone. The detectives thanked me and explained that while the remarks weren't incriminating on their own, they at least helped establish a timeline and offered context when viewed alongside the rest of the evidence. Somehow the cousin I grew up with that was weird is the same man who we later discovered would end the lives of 2 people.
I'm weird, and I'm proud to be weird, and my kids are weird. We're not killers.
After the trial, he was sentenced to a 150-year sentence. Both bodies were found in the woods somewhere, in a broken-down shed. One woman's neck was broken, and the other's skull was broken. I chose to not learn more about the cases because it makes me sick. I'm so sorry to the families. Keep your eye on your weird cousin. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you next week.
Imagine finding out that the bedtime rule that your grandmother gave you as a kid wasn't a superstition, it was a warning. Look, I get a lot of scary story submissions and very few really send chills down my spine, but this one was sent in from someone who lives in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and claims to have been stalked by a headless entity throughout her entire life. Sleepy Hollow is considered to be one of the most famous haunted towns in all of the US. Bear with me here because this is absolutely terrifying. The subject line is, "I think a decapitated entity has been following my family for decades." What? Hey Liz, I grew up in Sleepy Hollow, and before you roll your eyes, no, people who live here don't actually spend every waking moment talking about the Headless Horseman. It's mostly a punchline among locals. We roll our eyes at tourists who show up every October in costumes, snapping photos at the old Dutch church like the legend. Like the legend is a mascot instead of a warning. At least this is how I felt growing up. I'm not so sure anymore. She also mentions when she was a kid it used to be called North Tarrytown. Age 8. My earliest memory isn't even an encounter, it's a rule. My grandmother, who lived 2 houses down from us my whole childhood, had exactly one ironclad law: no playing outside after dark in October. Not try to be home by dinner, not watch the time, an absolute non-negotiable curfew that kicked in the moment the sun started sinking behind the tree line. She never explained why, and if we asked, she just looked at us with this strange stillness on her face and said the same thing every time. When the woods get quiet, come home. We thought that this was just an old woman's superstition. Every town has one grandmother that's like that. But one night, my cousin Danny and I decided to test it. We were cutting through the trail behind the Hendersons' property, a path that we'd walked maybe 500 times day and night without a second thought. It was maybe 7:30, not even that late. About halfway through, the woods did something that I had never experienced before or since. They were silent. There really wasn't any wind moving the leaves, no distant traffic hum from the main road. It was like someone had put the entire forest on mute. Danny grabbed my arm and neither of us said anything until we heard it. Footsteps behind us, not running, not scrambling, walking. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. Also with this strange double rhythm, like 2 feet landing in once instead of alternating. We froze and the footsteps stopped exactly when we did. We started walking again, a little bit faster now, and the footsteps matched us step for step, staying the same distance behind us no matter how quickly we moved. Neither of us turned around. I don't know why. Some instinct older than reason told us not to. We just walked faster and faster until we were running. Branches snapping against our arms until we broke out of the tree line into the orange glow of the streetlights at the edge of the neighborhood. And the second that our sneakers hit hit the pavement, the sound behind us vanished. We didn't talk the whole walk home, and when I walked through the door, breathless and pale, my grandmother didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask why we were out of breath or why Danny's face had gone colder than old paper. She just looked up from her chair and said, "I told you not to stay out after dark." And that was it. She went back to her knitting like the conversation was already over. Age 16.
You know what?
For years after this, nothing happened. I told myself Danny and I...
Granny gets tired. Mama gets tired. After saying so many times, you kind of learn to just quit talking, you know? Sorry that the first 1,000 times wasn't enough.
I had scared each other into hearing things, two kids working themselves into a panic in the dark. But by the time I was in high school, it had become a story that I tell at sleepovers, half embarrassed, always ending with, "We probably just spooked ourselves." Then I turned 16 and got my license, and the woods stopped being something that I walked through. It became something that I drove through alone at night on the back road that connects to our side of the town. It was maybe midnight. I was coming home from a friend's house, taking the road that cuts through 2 miles of dense trees before it opens back up near our neighborhood. No streetlights, no houses, just my headlights and white lines. I checked my rearview mirror out of habit just to make sure that no one was riding my bumper, and I saw something standing in the middle of the road. Well, behind me now, in the stretch I'd already driven through. Tall, motionless, wearing what looked like a long, dark coat that seemed to move slightly even though there was no wind. I couldn't make out the face. I want to be precise about this because I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times since. It wasn't just his face in the shadow or that I couldn't see it clearly in the distance, but there was no head to see. Just shoulders, then coat, then the night sky where the head should have been. I slammed the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked against my chest. My car skidded slightly on the road before stopping dead in the middle of the lane. When I looked back through the windshield instead of the mirror, the road behind me was completely empty. No figure, no coat, no sign that anything had ever been there. I sat in that stopped car for what felt like 10 minutes, hands shaking on the wheel before I could make myself drive the rest of the way home. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the shadows, a mailbox, or an overactive imagination fed by too many childhood stories. I did not tell my parents, but the next morning my dad casually asked me why I'd stopped in the middle of the road the night before. I hadn't told him I'd stopped, and I hadn't told anyone. He said that he could see my brake lights flare from our porch, which is nearly a mile away, with no direct line of sight to that stretch of road. I still don't know how he saw that. I've never asked him to explain it, and some part of me doesn't want to know the answer. Then we get to age 34. Years pass, and I moved 2 hours away for work. Built a life that had nothing to do with Terrytown, Sleepy Hollow. I mostly stopped thinking about any of it. The occasional nightmare, maybe. A flinch at a shadow on a dark road. Nothing more. Then one October, I came back to visit my parents for the weekend and stayed later than I'd meant to. The kind of evening where you keep saying one more cup of coffee until suddenly it's 11 p.m. and you have a 2-hour drive ahead of you. About 15 minutes out of town, still on familiar roads, I noticed something on the side of my mirror. At first glance, it looked like another car with its headlights on, keeping pace at a good distance behind me, except it never got closer and it never fell back. I sped up. It matched me exactly, staying at the same distance behind no matter how much I accelerated. I slowed down, thinking that maybe it would pass. It slowed too, holding the same gap like it was tethered to my bumper by an invisible line. My hands went cold on the wheel. I did the only thing I could think to do. I kept my eyes forward, refused to check the mirrors again, and I just drove. Faster than I should have, my heart slamming against my chest. A few minutes later, the headlights appeared coming from the opposite direction. Another car, finally rounding the bend toward me. In the wash of the lights, I let myself glance out the mirror once more. Whatever had been behind me was simply gone. No headlights peeling off into the side of the road, no taillights receding into the distance, nothing. It hadn't turned anywhere because there was nowhere for it to turn. It had just stopped existing the moment there were witnesses. Then we get to the attic. A few weeks after that drive, my grandmother passed away. She lived to be 91, and she was so sharp until the very end. My parents and I spent the weekend clearing out her house, and I was assigned the job of going through the attic. Decades of boxes, old furniture, and the accumulated paper trail of a long life. Near the bottom of a cedar chest wrapped in a yellowed pillowcase like it had been deliberately protected, I found a journal from the 1950s. Most of it is exactly what you'd expect. Recipes written in her looping cursive, notes about the church bake sale, a few lines about my grandfather courting her, but one page stopped me. It read, in handwriting pressed so hard to the paper it nearly torn through, "If you hear him behind you, don't look. He wants you to look." I kept reading because that wasn't the only entry. Over the following pages, spanning nearly 20 years, she described seeing the quote-unquote writer on 3 separate Octobers. Once outside the cemetery gate just after sunset, once on the wooded road, much like the one that I'd stopped on when I was 16, though she never named which road it was, and once at the edge of a field at dusk, simply standing there at the tree line facing the house. Every entry described the same sensation word for word, like she'd settled on the only language that fit. She wasn't being chased, she was being watched. And that brings us to today. Maybe it's just a family coincidence, 3 generations feeding the same childhood fear into each other until it becomes something that felt real. Maybe growing growing up surrounded by the legend planted a seed into our heads decades ago, and it simply grew in the way that stories do, passed down until they start to feel like a memory. Or maybe every legend starts because enough people across enough years experience something that they can't explain, and eventually someone writes it down. I still visit my parents every October. I still drive down that same stretch of road when I do. Just make sure I'm home before the woods go quiet. Literally, stories like these are exactly why I do this, and this one hit different enough that I'm actually going to Sleepy Hollow. So everyone pack your bags. You're all coming along with me. Let's go to Sleepy Hollow and see if we can see the Headless Horseman for ourselves. So we're here in person. Let's go explore this town. People say that they see him at the bridge, so our first stop is going to be the bridge.
Hi, I'm Nicole with Haunted Threads After Dark, and I'm here to read you a scary story in my very scary dark car. So,
it looks very scary.
I found this on a video 6 years ago. Well, it was a video that was made 6 years ago. And the creator of that video didn't know who to give credit to, so therefore I don't either. But here we go with the story. Empty house, someone knocking. If you think Ding Dong Ditch is just an annoying prank, wait until you hear what was actually knocking on the door of this abandoned house. This true story will make you lock your doors tonight. A long time ago, my girlfriend and I were looking for a private place to be alone.
This is a res story I heard near Cherokee, North Carolina. There was this guy.
Sorry guys, I'm not trying to be an a-hole or anything, but I just feel like that whole thing is off right there. We've listened to her stuff before, it's been good, but this one was not, so I'm moving on to this one. My friend who needs a drink of water.
Who said when he was younger and he lived with his parents that his dad would, at night, they had these pieces of plywood attached to hinges that they would close over the windows and they would padlock. And he always wondered why every night his dad would padlock the windows shut. Well, one day he decided to ask his father, and he said, "Father, why do you lock the windows at night? Like, what are you trying to keep out?" And his dad just looks at him and says, "You don't ask about that. We don't talk about it. Like, you ask anymore, you're going to be grounded. You're going to be in trouble." And he was like, surprised that his dad was so angry when he'd asked that question. And so he always wondered in the back of his mind, like, what was he trying to keep out of the house? Well, one night he is in his bedroom and he's having trouble sleeping. And he looks over at his alarm clock and it's exactly 3:03 a.m. And he starts hearing, and he hears this whistling, like coming from outside of the house. And he keeps hearing it over and over again. So he gets up and he goes out into the living room and he goes, and his dad is out there kind of frantically moving back and forth, pacing around. And he goes, "Dad, why are you, like, what is that whistling? Like, why are you up and what is that whistling sound? Like, are you making that?" And he goes, No, stop talking about it. Look, you need to go back into your bedroom and go to sleep. It'll be all right. And he said his dad was just like terrified. And so he went back into his bedroom and he said it went on for a little bit and then it stopped. And he said he started to realize, like, late at night, every time at 3:03 a.m., right, he would hear whistling and it would sound like it was coming from outside the house. And his dad would be up, just sort of walking the hallways, walking the floors, like freaking out. So, he was always confused about what this sound was. So one day he goes over to the neighbor's house and he goes, at night we hear this whistling sound and it happens every night, at the same time. Like, do you know anything about it? Do you hear the whistling? And he said, the neighbor said, "You need to go home right now." Like, and his neighbor wouldn't talk about it and was like creeped out and like instantly like went inside his house. So he kept trying to get it out of people in town. Like, does anybody know about like this whistling sounds that happen at night? Like, do you know what that is? No one would talk about it. So one night he is like hanging out with his brother in his bedroom, and they decided they were going to kind of stay up late telling some scary stories. Well, at like 3:03 in the morning, they hear, and they hear the whistling. And he tells his brother, like, do you hear that? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, every morning I hear that at like 3:03, and like Dad freaks out and stuff. And his brother's like, well, why don't you just like try and open one of the windows up and, see if you can get the key, unlock the padlock, and look out the window. And he's like, what? No, are you kidding? Like, Dad would freak out. Dad would freak out. And his brother's like, well, if you're not brave enough, I'll go do it. So he said his brother like snuck out into his parents' bedroom and got like his dad's keys and went over to one of the windows, unlocked it, and then moved the plywood away from the window.
No.
And when he looked out the window, he sort of just jumped back and he turned around and had just this look of dread on his face. And he didn't talk. He didn't say anything. And so he kept asking his brother, like, what did you see? What did you see? And his brother wouldn't say anything. And his brother's like, I'm going to go to bed. And he said, right as his brother started walking to the bedroom, all of a sudden at the door, he hears boom, 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 boom. Someone is knocking at the door. And he hears it again. Boom, 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 boom. You know, this loud knocking. And he goes up to the door and gets really close. And all of a sudden, his dad comes running out and grabs him and says, do not open that door, son. And he's like, why? Who's out there? Like, who's outside? And he's like, we can't say anything about it. We don't talk about it. Like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And he said all night long, they heard the knocking on the door. So the next morning when he gets up, right, his brother is very, very ill. And it's like his brother just got worse and worse and then eventually passed away. And he said he always attributed his brother what he had seen out of that window. Like, maybe that is what was the cause of what happened to him. And he said still to this day, his father will not talk about it, what was outside the house.
He appeared out of nowhere. No name, no memories, and no human reactions at all. This man was found wandering barefoot through a small American town, skin dark like coal dust clothes, torn eyes blank yet unsettlingly sharp. He didn't speak. He didn't understand any language. He didn't respond to touch. He had no ID, no fingerprints, no record anywhere. It was as if he had simply materialized out of thin air. Police took him to a hospital, but that's when things turned terrifying. Doctors tried checking his pulse. Nothing tried measuring his temperature. The device failed. His skin felt cold, but not human cold, more like cold metal. So they performed a full internal scan when the image appeared on the screen. Everyone froze inside. His body, there were no organs, no bones, no lungs, no heart, nothing. He was completely hollow, thinking it was a machine error. They scanned him again. Same result, a man alive with absolutely nothing inside. Authorities immediately shut the case down.
This cursed family took the life of over 1,000 people. This is the true story of Wrong Turn. In the 1950s, in the small town of Ravens Hollow, there was a family called the Crow family. The Crows lived in an old house on the edge of Ravenwood Forest. People in town hated them because of their looks, saying they were strange and didn't belong one night. The townspeople set fire to their house, thinking they would get rid of the curse, but the Crow family survived. They disappeared into the forest angry and broken. From that day on, they swore revenge. Years later, people began to vanish near Ravenswood Forest. Hikers, travelers, even townsfolk. Survivors say the Crows hunt and eat people as payback for what the town did to them. They hunt anyone who enters the forest, setting deadly traps, pits lined with spikes, pit and bear traps, and hanging wire nooses. They laugh when they hunt, and they drag their victims underground to eat them. The only thing they leave behind is a bloody crow feather. In the 1980s, a girl named Emily escaped after her friends disappeared while camping. She said the crows whispered as they chased her, "You burned us, now we burn you today." No one goes near Ravenwood Forest. Locals say you can still hear laughter and snapping twigs in the dark if you see a crow feather at the forest. Edge don't go in the Crow. Family is still waiting hungry for revenge.
While I was in labor, the nurse kept asking me who the man was in the corner. So this happened when I was giving birth to my daughter, and the epidural was working, but I couldn't feel like anything below my waist. At this point, I had been in labor for 18 hours, and the nurses let us know that it would be at least another hour. So I told my husband to go get some coffee downstairs. So at this point, I was alone in the room. At least I thought I was. I was looking at the heart monitor, and I heard somebody clear their throat. I didn't look up yet, but I just assumed it was my husband, and I said, "Hey, did you get yourself some coffee?" And I looked up and I looked at the door, and the door was still closed. A few minutes later, the nurse walked in, and she just came to check my IV and my blood pressure. And she said, "Did your husband leave already?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she said, "Oh, that was kind of crazy. I thought I saw somebody in the corner of the room." And I was like, "Oh, no, like, he went to go grab himself some coffee." And she just kind of laughed a little bit. She's like, "Oh, maybe, like, I've worked too many nights in a row." I tried telling myself that she just saw some kind of a shadow or something. I don't know. I kind of wrote it off pretty quick. 15 minutes later, another nurse came in to check on me. And she stopped, like, right as she got into the door. She's like, "Oh, did your family come back?" I said, "No." And she looked the exact same spot that the other nurse looked at in like the corner of the room. She said, "Oh, I thought I saw an old man over there." No. When she left, obviously I couldn't stop staring over at that corner because now that's two people that saw something. And I stared for a while, and then I noticed that the blinds were kind of like swaying. The window wasn't open. The air conditioning vent was on the opposite side of the room, so that couldn't have been it. So I called the call button because I was getting a little creeped. By the time the nurses came back, the swaying stopped, whatever. My husband came back about 20 minutes after that, and I told him everything. And he was like, you know, you've been in labor a while. You're probably just really exhausted. And I was like, yeah, like, you're probably right. And then he looked over at the corner, really the same corner. He's like, no, that was kind of crazy. I thought I saw, like, a man's figure in my peripherals. Before I could answer, the baby's heart rate completely dropped. So immediately my room was filled with nurses, doctors. Everything happened really, really fast. Long story short, the baby was born healthy. Great. So the next morning came around, and there was new nurses on the shift, and one came into the room just to check on me and the baby, and she said, you know, like, people talk about this room. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said that families over the last couple of years have talked about, like, an older man being in the corner of the room. And I just looked at her, and I was like, well, who is it supposed to be? And she kind of waited a sec. She was looking at my baby, admiring her, and then she answered. She said, nobody knows who he is, but everybody who mentions him, their baby tends to be healthy when they're born. I don't know what any of us saw that night. I don't know if it was exhaustion, if it was a coincidence or what, but my husband did take pictures after our baby was born, and every picture that had the corner of that room in it, it was a little blurry, I'm not gonna lie. And there was one specific picture where it looked like it could have been like a shadow, and it almost looked like two hands like pressed together like this. I don't know. I will say that the veil is very thin when a mother is about to introduce a new baby into the world.
Be careful of the gifts you accept. This story comes from a viewer, and she said that she had one hospice patient who absolutely changed her life. Her patient was a 33-year-old woman who had terminal cancer, but she lived in an absolute life of luxury. Designer clothes, expensive cars, a mansion. She had everything. Look at this stuff. Isn't it great? A few days before she transitioned, she grabbed the viewer's hand and she looked at her and said, you know, I don't have any family, and when I pass, I would love for you to accept the key to my kingdom. The viewer laughed it off, assuming that it was just like the medication talking, until the funeral. About a week later, a package from the estate arrived, and when she got home, her grandmother handed it to her. She said, child, I don't know what's in that box, but it don't feel right. Baby, you should send it back to who it came from. But she ignored the warning. Inside the box was a gold key hanging from a gold chain, and it was absolutely beautiful, and there was a handwritten note. If you choose to accept this key, everything I own belongs to you, but remember, that includes everything. She slipped the necklace on around her neck, and instantly everything felt different. When she walked back into that living room and her grandmother seeing that she had it on, she said, oh my gosh. Hey, now come take a listen. I have a story and it's creepy. It is time for a Denise Shoe story. Her grandmother said, oh baby, they got you now. She ignored it, and then a few days later, an unexpected check for $2,000 showed up in the mail. She said, I even had to laugh to myself, like, she really did give me the keys to somebody's lucky kingdom. The next afternoon when she got off work, another envelope arrived, but this time it contained more money than she had ever seen in her whole life. She was super excited. She ran to show her grandmother, and instead of her grandmother smiling and being excited too, she was absolutely terrified. Her grandmother pointed at that necklace, and then she said, take that thing off and burn that check. But before she could finish saying what she had to get out, she grabbed her chest and she collapsed. The viewer called EMS and started chest compressions, and her grandmother was rushed off to the hospital, and it was determined that she was suffering a massive heart attack. But the next morning, instead of taking off that necklace or burning that check, she went and took it to the bank. And as she went to the hospital, she got a call. Her grandma was gone. And a few weeks after that, another check showed up. This one had no return address, though. As she drove to the bank, she heard her grandmother say, clear as day, as if she was sitting in the passenger seat, "Don't take that money, baby.
Send it back."
She went and deposited the check anyways. So you already know, I gotta ask you, do you think that that final check is going to cost her life, or is it going to cost her someone else? Let me know what y'all think down in the comments. And as always, have your best spooky day. Bye.
This is a true story. A teenage babysitter agreed to watch two sisters while their parents attended an anniversary dinner across town. The house sat alone at the end of a quiet street, surrounded by tall trees. Everything seemed peaceful. The younger girl happily watched cartoons, but her older sister barely spoke. Every time the hallway lights flickered, she would freeze and stare toward the attic door. Around 11 p.m., the baby
Smoky Mountains are older than bones, literally. They're estimated to be between 300 and 400 million years old. They're older than the Rockies, the Alps, the Himalayas. They formed before the forming of the Atlantic Ocean. It's likely that at one point they were as tall as the Himalayas are today, but over billions of years, erosion wore them down into the rolling valleys and peaks that they're known for today. And that's why it's not surprising that there's so much lore and spooky stories that come out of the Appalachia region. In fact, I get so many stories from this region that I could probably do an entire mini-series just focusing on stories from Appalachia, but we'll just focus on this one today. This came from Holly, and she said that in June of 2024, she was having some problems with her partner. She's from North Carolina and wanted to get away, so she figured she'd take a quick weekend trip to a cabin in the Smokies, and she had been there before on weekend trips with friends, but never alone. But being familiar with the area, she wasn't nervous, and she found a booking on booking.com. For a nice little studio cabin, and it had a hot tub on the porch. It had a nice overlook of the mountains around it. Pretty much everything she was looking for. She said it was about $600 from her stay from Friday to Sunday, and she was eager to get going when Friday came around. So she already had a bag packed. After she left work on Friday, she headed straight for the mountains. The ride from the cabin from her house was about 2.5 hours, and she said she enjoyed the drive. She was excited. She actually didn't even tell her husband she was going because they weren't on speaking terms anyway, and she was just really looking forward to this time to have to herself. And so she gets to the cabin. There were some other cabins along the route up to where this cabin was, but it was secluded where it stood. And she said she checked in, she dropped her bags, and then she headed to a grocery store because she didn't intend to leave for the entire weekend. And the first night she was there was amazing. She said she cooked her favorite dinner, ate alone, took a bath, sat in the hot tub, drank some wine, watched TV, and eventually fell asleep. Next morning was an early start, but she woke up kind of sad. She said she cried and then just got along with her day. She decided to go downtown to all the little shops in Pigeon Forge, some lunch, and headed back to the cabin. And the day was kind of going along without a hitch. She was having another nice day by herself, and around 11 p.m. everything started to change. She said she was out on the front porch, sitting on the porch swing, and the woods were quiet, but she grew up in the woods. She's not afraid of them. She knows that you need to respect nature. She was just kind of sitting out there alone, thinking, when she heard a loud click, 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 and she noticed all the lights in the cabin went out. So she jumped up from her porch swing, ran inside, and tried to use her phone light to see. Slammed the door closed behind her and locked the deadbolt. She said this cabin had 2 points of entry, the front door and the back. One had the deadbolt, and the other had a keypad entry on the outside with an automatic locking mechanism. She tried not to panic, and she said she still had phone service, so she immediately got online and started looking up power outages in the area. And she had noticed when she checked into the cabin that the breaker box was on the outside of the house in view of the road, which she didn't like, but it wasn't a deal breaker when she was checking in. She couldn't find any information related to power outages in the area, so she just decided to sit in the living room for a little while. She did have a weapon on her, in case anybody is curious, but she said she was just waiting for a little while to see if the power would come back. But after a little while, it didn't. She just decided, you know what, I'm gonna go to bed. Hopefully the power will be back on in the morning. She's laying in bed, dozing off, when she hears footsteps on the wooden porch outside. And she said at this point, she sat up in bed and she was trying to convince herself that her mind was just playing tricks on her. But the footsteps outside seemed to be walking around the perimeter of the cabin, and they were actually making the stove inside the kitchen rattle. It sounded distinctly human, like 2 feet were walking, too small to be a bear or another large animal. She was still sitting in the silence, trying to convince herself that she was just hearing things, when she heard the front doorknob jiggle. The cabin was pitch black. She couldn't see anything except for what her phone light illuminated. But once she heard the doorknob jiggle, she ran to the kitchen and grabbed a large butcher knife out of one of the kitchen drawers. Turned her phone light off and went to the front window to look outside and see if she could see any movement or anybody out there, but all it was darkness. And as she's standing at the window, she hears the doorknob jiggle again, and at that point she said she freaked out. She grabbed a dresser and moved it in front of the door. Went back into the kitchen. She was panicking, but she did see a phone number on the side of the refrigerator which had the maid and the maintenance person's number. She tried the maintenance person first, thinking maybe he's here, maybe he's trying to restore the power, but he didn't answer. So then she calls the maid, and the maid actually answers and informs her that she actually owns the cabin. Says, I don't know anything about a power outage in the area. And Holly's like, well, is the maintenance person maybe here trying to restore the power? And there's a pause, and the owner ends up telling her, no, the maintenance person's my boyfriend. He lives about 20 minutes away. He's not there. And Holly says, well, there's someone outside the cabin trying to get in. And at that point, the owner tells her, you need to call the police and I'm on my way. Holly hangs up and she immediately dials the police. She's standing in the kitchen, and as she's on the phone with the woman who answered the police line, she can hear movement on the other side of the kitchen wall. So she runs into the bathroom and locks herself inside. She said there were no windows inside the bathroom, so she was sitting alone in complete darkness with only the illumination from her phone. The person on the other end of the police line ends up telling her, oh, a tree fell in the area. That's why there's a power outage. We'll send someone out. And Holly starts convincing herself, okay, it's just in your mind. As she's sitting in the bathroom, she continues hearing the footsteps outside on the porch. Eventually, though, after about 15 minutes pass, she starts hearing the police sirens in the distance, and she starts feeling a little bit of relief. And she can hear the police get out of the car and start walking around. With them outside, Holly feels safe enough to leave, and she goes outside to greet the police officer, and that's when the owner of the property also pulls up, and they all start talking. They search the perimeter of the house, but don't find anything. The police say, oh, it's okay that you called us, but it was probably just an animal. They leave, and that's when the owner of the property ends up telling her something unsettling. She says, my grandmother used to own this property, and there were all kinds of strange things that would happen when she was renting it out. Like one night, the entire front door got kicked in. They never found any sign of people in the area, and we don't know who did it, but it was distinctly kicked in at the bottom of the door. Her cleaner of the property had reportedly quit after complaining about footsteps outside of the cabin every time she was there cleaning the inside when guests had left. And the owner of the property felt so bad about this that she ended up paying for Holly to go and get a hotel that night. Holly says she's not really sure what to make of that night, but it was one of the most deeply unsettling and scariest nights of her life. And the other thing that stands out in her mind that she didn't really think about until later was when she checked into the property using the lockbox, she noticed that the code was already put into the door. One of those types of manual lock boxes where you slide the metal levers to make up a certain code in order for the lockbox to pop open and get the key. Apparently that was already on the code that she was supposed to use, but she didn't think anything of it. She thought maybe the cleaners had made a mistake, and she got the key out and entered the house. But she said she's heard enough scary stories about things in the woods, and she knows to respect certain things. And for some reason, this felt like more of a warning than anything else. It felt like she was somewhere that she just wasn't supposed to be. She's grateful that nothing worse happened. So who do you think was trying to get into her cabin?
Something trapped me on a mountain trail and made me loop the same section over and over again for hours. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about the dark figure that I saw every time the forest went silent that day. I first realized something was wrong when I passed the same fallen tree for the third time. I had gone hiking alone that afternoon on a mountain trail about 40 minutes from where I lived. It wasn't supposed to be a difficult hike. The trail was clearly marked, the weather was good, and according to the map near the parking lot, the entire loop should have taken a little under 2 hours. I had plenty of daylight left, and for the first 20 minutes, everything was normal. I passed a few people heading back towards the parking lot, but after that, I didn't see anyone else. The trail got quieter as I went further into the trees. I remember stepping over a large fallen pine that was blocking part of the path. Its roots had been ripped out of the ground and were sticking up beside the trail. There was a faded blue marker attached to one of the branches. I took a picture because the roots looked strange and almost like a giant hand coming out of the dirt. I kept walking, and maybe 20 minutes later I reached another fallen tree. At first I didn't think anything of it, and then I saw the blue marker. I stopped and looked at the roots, and it was the tree from the picture. I pulled out my phone and compared them. It was the same broken branches and the same exposed roots. Even the rocks around the trunk were in the same places. I thought the trail must curve around more than I realized. It was a loop after all. Maybe I had already reached the part that brought me back towards the beginning. But that didn't make sense because I hadn't seen any connecting trails, and I had only been walking for around 40 minutes. I continued anyway. The next section of trail went uphill and curved through a thick patch of trees. About 15 minutes later, I reached the fallen pine again, and that was when I started to get nervous. I knew I had been walking forward the entire time. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't taken another path, and there was no way I should have reached the same tree 3 times. I checked the trail map on my phone. The app opened, but the location marker wouldn't move. It just sat in one place spinning like it was trying to figure out where I was. I looked at the time, and it was a little after 3. I decided to keep moving because the trail was still clearly visible. I thought maybe the app was wrong and I was panicking over nothing. And that was when I noticed how quiet it had become. I couldn't hear any birds, there was no wind in the trees, and I couldn't even hear insects. The forest had been full of noise when I started, but now there was nothing except the sound of my shoes hitting the dirt. Even that sounded strange, muffled almost, like the air around me was absorbing it. I walked faster, and then I heard buzzing. It started suddenly and was so loud that I stopped walking. It sounded like a huge swarm of bees or flies was right beside my head. I looked around, expecting to see insects, but there weren't any. The noise seemed to be coming from deeper in the trees, and that was when I saw the figure. It was standing uphill from me beside 2 pine trees. It was extremely tall enough that at first I thought I was looking at a burned tree trunk. And then I saw the shape of its head and arms. It was completely dark. I couldn't see clothing or skin or any features. Its body was thin, and its arms hung much lower than they should have. It was standing perfectly still, and I don't even think it was breathing. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then I looked down at my phone to see if I had service, but when I looked back up, it was gone. The buzzing stopped at the exact same time. Everything became silent. I started walking quickly. I kept telling myself it had been another hiker standing in the shadows. Maybe the light made them look taller somehow. Maybe they moved while I checked my phone, but I knew that wasn't what I saw. A few minutes later, I passed a bent wooden trail sign, and the lettering was worn away, but one corner had been broken off. And then I passed a large gray rock besides the trail with a white streak running through the middle. And then I reached the fallen tree again. The landmarks were repeating in the same order. The tree, the bent sign, the gray rock, and then the tree again. I started running, and it felt like I had been out there for hours. My legs were starting to ache, and my mouth was dry. I kept checking the sky because I was afraid it was going to get dark before I could find my way back. But the sun never seemed to move. Every time I looked up, the light coming through the trees looked exactly the same. I tried taking a smaller trail that branched off to the left. I walked on it what felt like a half an hour, and it brought me back to the fallen tree. And the buzzing started again. I knew the figure would be there before I even looked, and this time it was standing further down the trail, still between the trees and still completely motionless, but it was closer than before. The buzzing was so loud that it hurt my ears, and I just felt this overwhelming feeling of dread when I was looking at it. I covered my ears and looked down at the ground, and when I looked up again, the figure was gone. The buzzing stopped. I kept going, and every time I completed another loop, it appeared again. Sometimes it was uphill from me, and sometimes it was standing deeper in the woods. It never walked towards me, and I never saw it move at all, but each time, it was closer. Eventually, I rounded a bend and saw it standing directly beside the trail ahead of me. It was much taller than I had realized. Its head was almost level with the lower branches. The buzzing became unbearable, and it felt like the sound was inside my skull. I couldn't make myself walk toward it. I backed away while keeping my eyes on it, and for the first time, its head moved. It tilted slightly to one side, and I turned and ran. I had been following the trail forward the entire time because I thought it had to eventually lead me out, but instead I started backtracking. I went in the direction I had originally come from, and at first nothing changed. I still passed the fallen tree and the gray rock, but they appeared in reverse order. That was the first thing that made me think I was doing the right thing. The buzzing started behind me, and I did not turn around. I could hear something moving through the trees beside the trail, and branches shifted as it kept pace with me, but I never looked over. I just kept moving. And then all at once the forest became loud again. Birds started calling from the trees, and the wind moved through the branches. I could hear insects in the grass. A few minutes later, I heard traffic somewhere below the mountain. I kept walking until the trees opened and I saw the parking lot. My car was exactly where I had left it. I got inside, locked the doors, and I checked the time. Only 1 hour had passed since I started the hike. It felt like I had been trapped on that trail for at least 8 hours. I started the car and left, and nobody ever believes me when I tell them what happened, but I won't go hiking there alone again. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back is not him. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. My brother, Kevin, not his real name, I'm trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night.
Can I say how cool it is that she's crocheting? I learned to crochet when I was a kid, but the only thing I could do was like a straight line, so I could make garland for the tree, okay? But I cannot actually make like a pot holder or a jacket or a handkerchief or anything like that.
He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately, and maybe being out in the world could help him get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents that he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout turned Eagle Scout turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave him his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to the trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities, we gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they would put a notice out to the ridge runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kev was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through. Just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of conversation with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption. "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheek and jaws. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shoes looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he'd smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy, as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom," was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower. But something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breathe. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all, really, but all I got were grunts and uh-huhs before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. This
is a 100% true story that happened to a woman in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, there was this woman named Sherry who moved into this house with her 2 children in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, she said, at the time, she didn't believe in anything supernatural. She really thought that was a bunch of nonsense. But she said, right away when they moved in, she would notice, out of the corner of her eye, sometimes shadows moving across the walls. She would hear strange noises that she couldn't explain. But she said for the most part, it was just a normal house. One night, she's upstairs in her bedroom, and she's folding laundry. She hears talking coming from her son's room. So she makes her way over to his room. The door's closed, and she hears her son having a full-on conversation with someone. And she's like, who is he talking to, at 12:30 at night? So she opens the door, and when she looks in his room, he is not in his bed. So she starts yelling for him. She looks down and sees him next to the side of his bed, on his knees, crouched down, with his head under the bed, talking to someone. And she's like, hey, who are you talking to? Like, who's under there? And her son's like, I can't tell you. And she said, what do you mean you can't tell me? Like, who's under the bed? And he's like, I can't say. He'll get mad. And she's like, what? Who's under there? So she runs over to the bed, and she looks underneath there. It's empty. There's nothing under there. So she's like, you know what? Just get back in bed. Like, just stop, doing whatever you're doing. Several weeks pass, and on a regular basis, she keeps finding her son talking to someone under the bed, except there's no one there. So after a few weeks of this happening, she thinks maybe something is wrong with her son. So she takes him to this child therapist. The therapist assesses him and says, he seems completely fine. It's probably just his imagination. So several months pass, and he keeps on doing this. Well, one day she's sitting down in the living room with him, and they're talking, when she notices he has some scratches and bruises all over his body.
Water I can give you.
And she's like, where did you get those scratches and bruises from? What's going on? And he's like, I can't say. I can't tell you. And she's like, yes, you have to tell me, what is going on with you? And finally, he breaks down, and he starts crying and stuff, and he just starts freaking out. And then he runs up to his room. So the mom, at this time is like, I don't know what to do. What is going on with my son? She's just panicking. Later that night, she's awoken to her son screaming in his bedroom. She runs as fast as she can. She goes in his room. She finds him halfway underneath the bed. He's grabbing onto the bed frame, and it looks like something is pulling him under the bed. So she immediately grabs him, pulls him out from under the bed. She looks under there. There's no one there. So she's like, you know what? This is weird. You're sleeping with me tonight. You're going to be in bed with me tonight. So they go back to her bedroom. He lays down. He falls asleep. She's sitting in bed. She can't sleep. She's freaked out about this whole situation. When all of a sudden she hears, shh, hey, come under the bed. And she's like, what? She looks over. Her son is sleeping. But then once again she hears, hey, come here, under the bed. I need to talk to you. And it's a man's voice. And she's like, no, who are you? Go away. And the man's like, come on, get under the bed. I need to tell you something. And she's like, no, I'm not going under the bed. And she said this man whoever he was just started yelling obscenities and getting really angry.
Oh my God.
So she grabs her son, they get out of the house, and she said she left that night and never went back. And still to this day, that house sits there. And she said she's talked to the neighbors, and they said since she's moved, like several families have lived there, and they move out immediately.
Warning to go ahead and scroll if you get scared easy, because I'm going to be reading a scary story submission that was sent to me via email. So sit down, get ready, or again, scroll if you get scared easy. The email reads, "Hi Casey, you can call me H when you read this, if you decide to read it out loud for everyone. I came across your TikTok page and I found it most amusing. It's no secret I love paranormal things, and I always did, even as a child. Your stories reminded me of some of mine. I want to start off by saying I'm from Egypt, Giza to be specific, and where I used to live when those following stories happened was pretty close to the pyramids and the Egyptian Grand Museum that was under construction at the time. Very known thing in my family that we see stuff, paranormal stuff anyways. I would love to say my mother is famous for it, which meant I somehow ended up with the same issue. As a child, I would see shadows or hear whispers. But as we moved into that house, which I spent over 14 years in, things grew interesting. To set it up, it was a 2-floor apartment. The top floor was where the bedrooms were, and the bottom floor was the living room and the kitchen. The issue always was the stairs. For a long while, my room was right next to the stairs, till I moved into my own individual one, leasing that one to my sister in 2020. When I was 7, my mom saw me coming out of my room completely from the dark. She said I ignored her, didn't look her way when she asked me to take her phone and cigarettes downstairs with her, and walked downstairs and disappeared into the guest bathroom. She was so upset, she rushed downstairs, only to find me asleep on the couch with my dad. And Dad confirmed I never was awake in the past 3 hours. The stairs were, well, like any stairs you can think of, but it was always wrong. I feared them at night most. The part that was down was the most scary. And I used to own a cat. I like to mention I never lived long without one. You know, animals just know things. And he too was scared of the stairs. Often, I'll find him staring at the top of it from downstairs or at the wall next to it. I also often see cats that weren't mine, black or white cats, for just a second. I would also feel them next to me and physically feel them touching my leg like they were passing. And when I was 16, the nightmare started. It was always the same, in the wolf hour, around 3 to 5 o'clock. And before Fajr starts, they put in parentheses the prayer, if I mispronounce that, please correct me. I would dream of a tall, dark woman standing, all leaned down, and she didn't fit, coming slowly upstairs in my room direction. I always woke up before she made it fully up the stairs. Never seen her face. It was always so dark, but it always felt heavy, paralyzed, terrified. Whenever I was on those stairs, I would feel movements behind me. Or when I slept, I can sometimes feel the mattress shifting, like somebody was sitting down on it behind me. If I went downstairs for a snack at midnight or past it, I can always see things moving near the stairs from the open kitchen, and I always chose to ignore it. My cat would spend hours staring at the walls of the stairs, not even answering or looking at us, and it would always be by the stairs in my nightmares. Every time, the same dream. I eventually learned not to sleep in that hour, whether after or before, but not in between 3 to 5 a.m. And I always took my cat with me everywhere. And sometimes he would run like something was after him. There was a lot of weird things about that apartment, but for 14 years, the stairs terrified me. I have no explanation. I was told by the gatekeeper of the building once that he too encountered stuff in the basement of the building. A huge shadow he came across while fixing something, let alone the fact my mom saw things on the stairs too, or heard him. I would also love to mention the apartment next to us where the stair wall connected was empty, as well as the one on top of my room where I heard often kids running or furniture shifting. No one lived there. Everything always stops when Fajr prayer starts. I've moved now, and I would be pleased to tell you that this new apartment has none of it, and my new cat, my older one, passed. I also used to see him often after he passed, while I was very awake midday. He wasn't scared at all. I feel no negative energy here, and not me nor my mom encountered a single thing since then. I have no idea what the old apartment could have possibly had, or why I was the most to see, hear, and feel it, but I promise you it lasted long enough. With love, H. H, first of all, this is one of like my favorite stories that's been sent to me. Little fun fact about me, I love Egypt. I'm obsessed with Egypt. I'm obsessed with the pyramids. I could go on a whole rant about that. So this is actually so interesting to me. It does not shock me that you would have experiences like this, especially if you're intuitive, empathic, living in an area with so much history with so many unanswered questions. I'm super happy to hear that you guys are in a space where you feel safer, more connected. I definitely don't like that sounds like the spirits that you were encountering in your previous space, they seem negative. It seems like you were fearful, like very fearful, and like it wasn't positive energy. So I am happy that you are away from that, and thank you so much for following me and supporting too. If you guys want to send in your own submission to me, you can send it to the email that I'm going to put right here on this video. It's also located in my bio.
I was planning on having a long talk with them the following morning.
Let's go to the next one. I don't think I'm ready for that one.
I was planning on having a long talk with them the following morning, but their brute of a father had somehow found us. He'd been stalking us for a while now, ever since I took my kids back, and I had...
Isn't it weird how I try to find something else for us to watch, but it's just like slideshow stuff, so... I'm going to cross centers, up, down, left, right. Very nice.
To move to new places just to get away from him. I could feel my heart racing in my chest as I heard him banging on the door of our new home. Please open the door, Stacy. I know you're going through a lot right now, but I just want to talk.
Hey, it's always your fault, right? It's always my fault.
Get the hell away from us, Nathan! I know you just want to take my kids away and put them back in that dark place you'd left them, but I won't let you.
I quickly grabbed Stephen and Sarah, and I took them through the back door to the car. Nathan had heard the engine start, so he ran in front of the vehicle, saying, I'm not gonna let you leave until we talk and you stop this madness.
I'm done listening to your lies, Nathan. You've turned my kids against me. Now they won't talk or eat.
Let's try to find something. Oh my gosh. I'm getting tripped out. Things aren't lining up the way they should. This feed right here. What is happening right now? No. In the 90s, there was a rumor of a cryptid living the forest in Switzerland. Children complained of seeing a man wearing a gas mask watching them play. Their parent told them they were making it up. And then in 2010, a photographer caught this image of a man in a cloak wearing a gas mask. The children were telling the truth. This is by Trill Momcat. My cousin picked up a hitchhiker about 20 years ago. Nice enough guy. Cousin was hungry, so stopped at McDonald's, grabbed the hitchhiker some breakfast, too, and then dropped him off where the guy had said he was headed. No big deal, right? Next morning, my cousin's watching the morning news and sees that the hitchhiker's face. Dude was a serial killer and had killed someone that picked him up. Cousin calls the cops and they had him come in. Turns out the hitchhiker had killed the very next person after my cousin that had given him a ride. He'd killed a few people that had given him rides. That was his MO, his mode of operation. They asked the hitchhiker why he didn't kill my cousin. He said, I planned to, but he was a really nice young man. He bought me breakfast. I couldn't kill someone that bought me breakfast. Ow. Okay, so let me see if I can catch up to something over here. Let's go recent UFO, shall we? Okay, we're down there. Let's go now. Let's go now. Let's go now. Wow. Pentagon released the 4th. Aw, I hurt you too, buddy. Wow.
The 4th UAP file release is officially here. Today, the Department of War published another batch of declassified UAP material. After digging through it, I think there are a few files that deserve immediate attention.
Could be, yeah.
The newest release contains about 40 separate case files, and many of those, like before, include multiple pages of reports, imagery, supporting documents, briefings. I've only had time to dig through some of them, but I wanted to give you a first look at a few highlights before I start doing these deeper breakdowns. This drop offers some more archived NASA audio files, but there are also a few newly released NASA images
got a lot like that.
What appears to be a cylindrical or cone-shaped object that was captured in low Earth orbit
Yeah,
in
from
1996. Not sure what that is, but I will say that is interesting. There's also additional declassified briefings from the late 1940s connected to Project Sign, and Project Sign was one of the Air Force's earliest official program efforts to investigate UAP. This release also includes everybody's favorite military infrared footage.
Seriously.
I have an announcement next week that will impact the entire nation.
Okay.
That's the cryptic message that has everybody asking the exact same thing. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, yes, the same one who believes that UFOs and UAPs are of non-human origin, some of them at least, just released that message and it has the internet buzzing. In addition, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who was also at the recent UAP hearings, replied with just 2 words. I know. I mean, come on. So, Americans obviously flooded the internet asking one burning question. Is UAP disclosure finally happening? Think about it. She's seen classified files. She's been in many secret meetings and briefings. What does she know that we don't? And why now? Well, not so fast, because she also stated it's bigger than aliens.
Announcement next week that will impact the entire nation. Press conference to be announced soon. Everyone's wondering if it's aliens, but maybe it goes even deeper than that.
Yeah, I think
can you tell us?
I think it's bigger than that. I think that for far too long, people have been lied to by their government, and so I won't get too much more into the details, but we're going to be doing something really big.
What does Congress know? I think quite a bit. What do you think of Luna's announcement? What do you think it's about? Could it be something relating to the JFK files being released, or do you think it actually has something to do with disclosure?
Are you saying you have definitive proof of alien existence? Yes, that is correct. We have extensive video footage, credible first-person sightings, tons of their technology, and we are in possession of an alien body.
Wow.
What? Are you kidding me? You have biological evidence? You're sure of this? Yes, we are quite sure of this. And we have known about it since the 1950s. And they're coming from the ocean. The ocean. Oh, okay. Well, why are you telling us now? Because of the increased frequency of the alien ships. Hey, if I could just interrupt.
Excuse me.
What's up, everybody? Alien here.
Hey, what up, alien?
Hi. Hello. Yes,
Hi.
I'm an alien. I did borrow a skin suit, so I wouldn't freak anyone out too much.
Hi.
We landed from a very distant galaxy thousands of years ago. Our technology is just so far superior to yours. Honestly, humanity has been a little bit of a joke to us. Usually we just pop out of the ocean and see what everybody's up to. But lately, due to global warming, you're messing with the ocean. You're actually a threat to us now.
Oh, you are,
so
aren't
we've been
you?
watching you a little bit more closely, doing some
good.
reconnaissance, deciding whether or not we need to intervene. You know, whether or not we're going to let humans live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Is this the best UFO footage recently? Wow, it looks like a streetlight to me. What the hell is that? Wow. That's amazing. Wow, what the hell? Spaceballs Deluxe, like, what the fuck, dude? Seriously. This person is completely calm. No increased breathing. Wow.
Okay, breaking news. The fourth tranche of UFO files have released, but the question remains, what in the hell are they releasing? Because this is not a UFO. This is a freaking balloon, right? What is the Pentagon trying to do here? Are they trying to change the narrative from UFOs and orbs and aliens and things like that? Right? Because obviously, I mean, you don't have to be an expert to really understand these footage right here. This is a balloon. So what is this all about? Let's talk about it from the bedroom. So one of the video's description from the US Department of War, it says the United States Indo-Pacific Command submitted a report of an unidentified anomalous phenomenon to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, consisting of 5 minutes of video footage from an infrared sensor aboard a U.S. military platform in 2025. Okay, so I have a message for the people who are submitting this kind of stuff, because you know very well this is a freaking balloon, right? You submit the video to ARROW, and then what they do is they're trying to spin the story, and they labeling these videos UAP, right? An identifying anomalous phenomenon. Oh, we don't know what it is, right? It's blurry, it's black and white. Oh my gosh, it could be an alien, but we just don't know. But you know what? Let's just put it out there for the public, right? Maybe they'll decide what it is. Well, you know what it is? It's a freaking balloon. That's what it is.
That's
okay,
what it
so
is, yo.
this is embarrassing. To be quite honest, especially from the U.S. Department of War. And then there's this other video which is more embarrassing, to be quite honest, and it says the United States Northern Command submitted a report of an unidentified anomalous phenomenon to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, consisting of 32 seconds of video footage from an infrared sensor aboard a U.S. military platform in 2020. This is crazy because they're saying that it's not maneuvering, it's not moving, it's not changing directions. But on the bottom it says that it appears to be a balloon or somewhat deformed balloon, right? Yeah. But you see what's going on here? They're trying to spin the story. They're releasing these videos to ARROW. Then ARROW, right, what they do is they take the video and they try to, oh my, yeah, this is, you know, it's mysterious. We don't know what it is. Yeah, it could be, you know, some type of.
We have breaking news. The government has released UFO.
New UFO footage just dropped from Brazil, and it matches exactly what a US Air Force.
Alright, I'm going to stop on this guy because I trust and believe in this guy. Let's see what his name is real quick. Like, interstellar discussion. Please follow, like, subscribe, whatever you need to do to interstellar discussion. This guy is the box that rocks, seriously. Let's go.
Brazil using only a Sony camera with a crazy zoom. A dark black object covered in yellowish lights that flow and move like a lava lamp around it. Fluid motion, multiple lights. It's pretty wild.
Yes, it is pretty wild. Dude, look at that. Looks pretty intelligent to me. Hello, grandmother.
Now, compare it to this. A US Air Force veteran and geospatial intelligence specialist, Dylan Borland, testified in Congress about what he saw in 2012 at Langley Air Force Base.
As it flies to me, a triangle
Dude, look at
around
it,
the
right
light.
there.
I can't tell you if it's active camouflage. I
Nope.
can't tell you if it appeared around the
can't.
light, but I can tell you that it was a white light and then it was a triangle.
Oh, yeah.
It stopped about 100 feet in front of me and approximately 100 feet above me. My telephone got extremely hot, completely froze, dead. I remember how thick it was. It was
That's
between
me.
1 to 2 stories.
Okay, so that to me looks like my son's T-Rex costume. It's got corners, it's got edges, it's got things like that.
There were 4 lights in total, 1 light on each corner, and a larger light in the center, 2 to 3 times the size of the corner light. But what was really odd was the outside. The best way to describe it is like looking at a James Webb telescope picture, where you have the colors and then the black background. So the craft itself was this black metallic flake paint, but on top of the craft was this gold, lava, plasma, some type of fluid going over and around the craft. I'm under this for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then the center light flashes 2 to 3 times, no sound, immediately shoots up to commercial jet level minimum, in my opinion. And I immediately feel static electricity all over my body, and then I smell the smell of after a thunderstorm or lightning storm, that really strong summer thunderstorm smell. Gets up to flight level. I'm trying to get my phone reset.
Now, listening to Dylan Borland's description, look how similar they are.
Dylan
A black
Borland,
craft,
you're tripping
yellowish
me out,
lights
dude.
flowing like lava around it, fluid motion, a thick, solid
Fluid.
structure, one
Bayfield.
filmed in Brazil in 2009, one seen up close by a trained military witness in Virginia in 2012. And from my point of view, these sound near enough identical, and this makes the new Brazil footage even more authentic. So of different continents, different years, but the descriptions almost match perfectly. Like, is this a coincidence, or are we looking at the same type of craft? And I'm not overanalyzing it, but it sure makes you wonder. What do you
Yeah,
guys think?
seriously.
You let me know down below. Interesting.
You tell me down below.
Look at that.
Mm-mm.
Holy shit, what is that?
Dude, seriously.
I
What
am.
is it?
That's not a plane.
Oh my gosh. Dude.
That is not an airplane.
No, that's not. Oh my gosh.
You see it? That is not a satellite and that is not an airplane.
Oh my goodness.
I've never seen anything like that before.
Dude, I mean, are you serious right now? Wow. Really? Wow. Well, thank you so much once again for hanging out with me tonight. We are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It was my pleasure hanging out with and hopefully entertaining you. I don't know. Thank you to all of my friends out there, wherever you may be listening Beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time, and I can't wait to do it again tomorrow night. We're gonna do story time with me, TessaTNT. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're breaking the law right now. This is the book I got. Out There Screaming, an anthology of black horror, edited by Jordan Peele. 9911 light to cure my ears. Do you see back here? Same crazy time, same crazy place. Mwah.